Chapter 4393. Sir, you want to challenge the 10th on the Void Yama Divine List? Xiao Yu had been following Zhuowen. After Zhuowen paid 30,000 Chaos Gems and signed the life and death waiver agreement, his eyes widened in disbelief. Although he knew that Zhuowen's cultivation was not bad, it was only the Qian Kuan Great Tribulation. The top 10 on the Void Yama Divine List were all experts of the Cosmic Dharma Plane, and each of them was more powerful than an ordinary Cosmic Dharma Plane cultivator. He did not think that Zhuowen would have a good result by challenging the 10th on the Void Yama Divine List. Yes, I'm just trying. Zhuowen nodded seriously. Xiao Yu's lips curled into a bitter smile. He opened his mouth and watched as Zhuowen followed the old man's maid into the challenge room in the depths of the hall. Not long after Zhuowen entered, Li Hong walked over to Xiao Yu and asked curiously, "Which rank is Zhuowen challenging on the Void Yama Divine List?" Xiao Yu came back to his senses and immediately became respectful. He smiled bitterly and said, "Miss Li Hong, he is challenging the 10th on the Void Yama Divine List." Li Hong's face stiffened and she blurted out, "Is he courting death? How dare he challenge the 10th on the Void Yama Divine List without considering his cultivation level?" Li Hong came to the counter with a gloomy face and said to the old man, "Elder Anshi, Zhuowen is a guest of the Void Yama family. Can you cancel his challenge?" Li Hong did not care too much about Zhuowen's life or death. After all, Zhuowen had overestimated himself by challenging the 10th ranked genius on the Void Yama Divine List. However, the problem was that he was a guest of the Void Yama family. If he died here and Ziyang spread the news, the reputation of the Void Yama family would be damaged. The old man at the counter was called Elder Anshi by Li Hong. He looked up at Li Hong and said calmly, "You should know the rules here. Once a challenge starts, it cannot be stopped. Unless the challenger voluntarily gives up, no one can interfere. This is an iron rule, and I cannot change it." Li Hong frowned slightly. Seeing Anshi's determined face, she knew it was useless for her to say more. She could only wait anxiously in the hall, her beautiful eyes looking at the exit of the challenge room, her heart praying that nothing would happen to Zhuowen. "Cousin, sorry to keep you waiting." Suddenly, a young man in a rather sorry state walked out from the challenge room. His gaze fell on Li Hong, who was in the center of the hall. He limped over with the support of a maidservant. The young man had a chiseled face, and above his bright eyes was a pair of sharp, sword-like eyebrows. However, due to his serious injuries, his sharp eyes had dimmed quite a bit. "Cousin, did you succeed in your challenge?" The moment Li Hong saw the young man, she hurriedly went up to him and helped him over from the hands of the maidservant. Then, he sat on a seat at the side of the hall. The young man gave a thumbs up and said with a smile, "Finally, the heavens do not disappoint those who persevere. My cultivation has been fruitful, and I have successfully passed the challenge. From now on, I will be one of the top 50 geniuses on the Shuyang Divine List. Greetings to young Master Li Shaw." The moment Xiao Yu saw the young man, he hurriedly knelt on one knee and bowed respectfully. Li Shaw was quite famous in the Shuming family, and he was a somewhat famous genius among the younger generation. Xiao Yu remembered that Li Shaw's ranking on the Shuyang Divine List should be around 70 or 80. This time, he should have come to challenge the 50th genius. Judging from his tone, Li Shaw should have succeeded. As expected of a genius expert of the Shuming family, he had improved so much in such a short time. Thinking of this, Xiao Yu looked at Li Shaw with eyes full of admiration and reverence. "Did you bring this servant?" Li Shaw waved his hand, indicating that Xiao Yu need not be so polite, and then looked at Li Hong and asked in confusion. He remembered that when he came out with Li Hong, she did not bring any servant with her. "It's a long story. I did not bring this servant. It was Zhuowen." Li Hong was furious when she thought of Zhuowen. She gritted her teeth and said, "Zhuowen? Who is that?" Li Shaw frowned slightly. This was the first time he had heard of this name. "It's Ziyang's distant nephew," Li Hong said. Li Shaw nodded, but he did not care. Ziyang was just the leader of a higher realm, and his status was lower than his. He did not even care about Ziyang, let alone Zhuowen, who was just Ziyang's distant nephew. "What about this Zhuowen?" Li Shaw asked with a smile. He also entered the challenge room, and he challenged the 10th on the Shuyang divine list. Li Hong gnashed her teeth in anger. The 10th. Li Shaw nodded, but he soon realized something and shook his head. He looked at Li Hong and asked, "Cousin, what did you say? You said this guy challenged the 10th on the Shuyang divine list. What is his cultivation?" Li Hong frowned and said helplessly, He should be at the late stage of the universe tribulation at most." The maid silently led Zhuo Wen into the deepest part of the challenge room. Along the way, Zhuo Wen discovered that the space here was very large. It was like a beehive with layers upon layers. If there was no one to lead the way, it would be easy to get lost. At the same time, he found that where the maid stopped, there were 10 huge challenge rooms. These 10 challenge rooms were much larger than the ones he had seen along the way. The doors of the challenge rooms were even brighter and more colorful. Densely packed different patterns appeared on them, making them look mysterious and extraordinary. Esteemed guest, these 10 challenge rooms belong to the top 10 geniuses on the Shuyang divine list. There are avatars of the 10 geniuses in them, and they have left behind their peak strength. If you encounter any danger, you must crush the token immediately. Otherwise, we will not be responsible for your accidental death. The maid took out a token half the size of a palm and handed it to Zhuo Wen. She continued, "Esteemed guest, write your order on the token. If you succeed, your name will be on the Shuyang divine list." Zhuo Wen took the token, condensed his divine power on his fingertips, and wrote the word Zhuo on the token. After keeping the token, Zhuo Wen entered the door opened by the maid. Clang. When the door was completely closed, Zhuo Wen had time to look around the challenge room. In the center of the room, there was a square arena, the surface of which emitted a milky white light. In front of the arena, there was an altar. Above the altar, there was a groove, the shape of which was the same as the token in Zhuo Wen's hand. Zhuo Wen walked to the altar and put the token in the groove. The arena in front of him suddenly released a blazing white light. Then, a grand and majestic voice rose in the room. 10th on the Shuyang divine list, Go Yi, the young master of the Holy Azure Temple, one of the 5 great temples. His cultivation is at the middle stage of the cosmic Dharma stage, and he is skilled in all kinds of fire attribute superpowers. He has a fierce personality. If the challenger is afraid, you can give up now. If you want to continue, you can directly jump into the arena and start the challenge. Chapter 4394. Zhuo Wen was deep in thought. Go Yi was ranked 10th on the Void Yama divine list. He was definitely not someone an ordinary mid-Dharma adept could compare to. His strength definitely far exceeded his own cultivation. As for Zhuo Wen, his cultivation had reached the peak of the mid-Qian Kuan tribulation stage with the help of demonic power after he had mastered the 2nd level of the limitless demonic book. Later, in the process of saving Zi Yang and Hong Ling in the Dark Ruins, he had refined many powerful evil spirits. This allowed his cultivation to naturally break through and reach the late Qian Kuan tribulation stage. Without the help of formations, divine weapons, and so on, Zhuo Wen wanted to see what level his true strength had reached. "I'll let you test my current strength first." Zhuo Wen looked at the platform. Countless white light condensed into a human silhouette. His eyes were burning with fighting spirit. His right foot stepped on the ground, and his entire body shot out like an arrow, leaping onto the platform. The moment Zhuo Wen landed on the platform, the white light emitted by the human silhouette in front of him reached its peak. It was dazzling and sharp. After the white light faded, the person who appeared in front of Zhuo Wen was wearing a fiery red robe. His hair was burning like fire, and a golden ring floated above his head. The fiery red hair just happened to pass through the golden ring. This person was Go Yi. Another one who doesn't care about his life. Go Yi's lips curled into a mocking smile. Suddenly, he snapped his fingers, and the surrounding temperature soared. Fireworks lit up around the arena like blooming flowers, looking bright and dazzling. Go Yi disappeared before Zhuo Wen's eyes. By the time Zhuo Wen reacted, Go Yi had jumped out from the fireworks behind him. His fist, which was burning with strange flames, was aimed at the back of Zhuo Wen's head. Zhuo Wen was already prepared. He took a step forward, and strange purple ripples appeared around him. He dodged Go Yi's fist, and at the same time, his right hand was like a hook, grabbing at Go Yi's throat. The smile on Go Yi's face grew wider, and she disappeared from Zhuowen's sight once again, causing Zhuowen's attack to hit empty air. At the same time, Go Yi appeared behind Zhuowen without anyone noticing, and used an extremely fierce attack to launch a sneak attack on Zhuowen. Fortunately, Zhuowen's primordial chaos movement technique was extremely extraordinary. He was able to narrowly dodge Go Yi's sneak attacks every time. What a strange divine ability. This Go Yi is proficient in using fire attribute divine abilities. Can his escape technique borrow the surrounding flames to constantly teleport? Zhuowen observed the flames that surrounded the arena, and a thoughtful look appeared on his face. The reason why Go Yi lit up the flames around the stage at the beginning was not for illumination, but to set up a medium in advance to use this strange escape technique. After finding out the weakness of Go Yi's strange escape technique, Zhuowen did not hesitate to bring out the 9 layers of the universe world. He immediately opened the second layer of the world and released the ice calamity inside. Instantly, the entire arena was enveloped in extreme cold. Countless snowflakes fell down like goose feathers, covering the arena's surroundings. The flames that originally surrounded the arena were gradually extinguished under the continuous cover of the cold snow. Meanwhile, Go Yi, who was hidden in the flames, revealed her figure. Zhuowen did not hesitate to open the second to 6th layers of the 9 layers of the universe world. The reason why he did not open the first layer was because the first layer was a fire calamity, and Go Yi was proficient in using flames to teleport, so he did not open the first layer. Ice, blood lightning, black lightning, silver white, fiery red corrosive flood, and countless divine mountains swept out in all directions, all pouring down on Go Yi's body. In an instant, a deafening explosion sounded around the arena, and the huge challenge room shook violently because of it. However, to Zhuowen's surprise, even with so many calamity energies attacking together, the challenge room did not show any signs of cracking. It seemed that the material used in the challenge room was extraordinary. After all the calamities were released, Zhuowen found that Go Yi was not as severely injured as he had imagined. Instead, a huge Dharma idol appeared in front of him. This Dharma idol knelt on one knee on the ground with both hands protecting its head. It actually blocked the 6 calamities just now. Go Yi stood in place, staring at Zhuowen, and said with a smile, "How interesting. You're only at the late stage of the Great Cosmos Tribulation, but your strength has reached such a level. Also, your universe world is really strange. It actually has 9 layers. However, this level can't cause any substantial damage to me." Go Yi jumped up and merged into the Dharma idol. He looked down at Zhuowen from the Dharma idol and said indifferently, "Die." After saying that, Go Yi's Dharma idol suddenly burst into a blazing sea of fire. In the surging sea of fire, the huge Dharma idol held a sword with both hands and slashed horizontally like a storm. Streaks of scorching sword intent fell like dense raindrops, all of them bombarding Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly, but he took dozens of steps back unhurriedly and pointed his right finger at the void. In an instant, Zhuowen's aura changed drastically. The 7th layer of the 9 layers of the universe world suspended behind him suddenly cracked open. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Violent black winds rushed out from the 7th floor, scrambling to be the first to emerge. The rolling black winds intertwined in the void, turning into black dragons that were tens of thousands of feet long. They were lifelike, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. After Zhuowen's cultivation reached the late stage of the Great Cosmos Tribulation, his strength had improved further, and he already had the ability to open the 7th layer of the universe world. A total of 9 black dragons that were tens of thousands of feet long attacked Go Yi's Dharma idol fiercely from 9 directions. Go Yi, who was originally unstoppable, was entangled by the 9 black dragons and was unable to break free for a moment. The power of the 7th layer's calamity is really not bad. Zhuowen saw that Go Yi began to fall into a disadvantage under the entanglement of the 9 black dragons. Zhuowen could not help but secretly nod his head. I wonder how powerful the 7th layer's calamity will be under the state of demonic corruption. As Zhuowen spoke, he slowly closed his eyes. When he opened them again, His eyes flickered with a strange red light. At the same time, a thick black fog began to appear around his body. The black fog quickly spread, and in the blink of an eye, the entire space around the arena was dyed black. Under the state of demonic corruption, the 9 black dragons became even darker, and the 9 pairs of lantern-like dragon eyes surged with a demonic red light. At this moment, the 9 black dragons roared and rapidly expanding from tens of thousands of feet to tens of thousands of feet. Zhuowen silently looked around the arena and realized that the 9 huge black dragons did not crack the challenge room. It seemed that the challenge room also used the power of the spatial laws, allowing the space to extend infinitely and be able to carry large objects. At the same time, Go Yi's Dharma idol was weakened by the demonic fog, and the flames on the surface of the Dharma idol gradually weakened until they were extinguished. Taking advantage of the moment when the Dharma idol was at its weakest, the 9 black dragons launched their strongest attack, tearing Go Yi's Dharma idol into pieces. Inside the Dharma idol, Go Yi's eyes widened as he fell from mid-air. His gaze stared fixedly at the depths of the black fog. That pair of demonic red eyes, for some reason, he asked, "Just who are you?" However, just as Go Yi finished speaking, the 9 black dragons completely dismembered him and tore him into pieces. Chapter 4395. In the young Hall Master's palace, the red-haired youth who had been cultivating in seclusion suddenly opened his eyes and spat out a mouthful of blood. Go Yi wiped the corners of his mouth and muttered to himself with a gloomy expression, "My projection doppelganger has been completely destroyed. Who did it?" After a long silence, Go Yi stood up and strode out of the secret room. Inside the challenge room, the endless thick black fog retracted and finally merged into Zhuowen's body. The scarlet color in the depths of Zhuowen's eyes gradually faded. He silently looked at Go Yi's projection doppelganger, which had been torn to pieces by the black dragon, and frowned. It seems that the 10th on the Void Yama divine list is not very strong. If Li Hong and the others heard this, they would definitely explode. The top 10 on the Void Yama divine list were definitely influential figures among the younger generation of the Void Yama realm. Now, Zhuowen had degraded them to be nothing. However, Zhuowen was indeed qualified to say this. With Zhuowen's strength, without relying on any trump cards, he was at most on par with Go Yi. But once he entered the demonic state, his strength would increase too much. Go Yi was not his opponent at all. Maybe I should challenge the top 3 geniuses on the Void Yama divine list. Zhuowen muttered to himself. He had not used his full strength, but Go Yi's projection doppelganger had been destroyed. This made Zhuowen feel powerless. When Zhuowen opened the door of the challenge room, the beautiful maid who had been waiting outside opened her beautiful eyes and looked at Zhuowen. "Honorable guest, you defeated Go Yi's projection?" The beautiful maid looked at the mess in the challenge room and asked in shock. "Yes. Help me register. I remember that there is a certain reward for defeating the projection of the corresponding genius on the Void Yama divine list." Zhuowen nodded. The beautiful maid nodded repeatedly. Her attitude became much more respectful and fanatical. This was the new 10th ranked genius of the Void Yama divine list. His future was limitless. On the way out with Zhuowen, the beautiful maid even deliberately showed off her graceful figure. Her beautiful eyes looked at Zhuowen as if they could drip water. Unfortunately, Zhuowen turned a deaf ear to him. He was considering whether or not he should continue to pay the fee to challenge the top 3 on the Void Yang God list. However, he quickly gave up. The Shulong family behind Shu Ju was also in Shuyang Divine City. Although he had used a fake name to challenge the Shuyang Divine list, there was still a high chance that he would be exposed. "Maybe I can try to challenge him, but there's no need to defeat him," Zhuowen muttered to himself. "Honorable guest, please wait in the hall for a moment. I'll report to Lady Anshi." The beautiful maid pointed at the many seats in the middle of the hall. She bowed apologetically and left with Zhuowen's permission. On the other hand, Zhuowen casually found a seat in the hall and sat down. What surprised him was that Li Hong was sitting not far away, and Xiao Yu was standing respectfully to the side. Li Hong and Little Yu naturally noticed Zhuowen who had come out. The former revealed a surprised and confused expression, while the latter's face was filled with joy. He hesitated for a moment, but still excused himself from Li Hong and hurried to Zhuo Wen's side. "My lord, you've finally come out. You finally gave up on the challenge?" However, this is human nature. The top 10 geniuses of the Void Yama divine list are too strong. Many cultivators don't even dare to challenge them. "My lord, you're already very courageous." Xiao Yu glanced at Zhuowen and found that the latter was unharmed. He thought that Zhuowen had finally given up on the challenge and could not help but comfort him softly. Zhuowen looked at Xiao Yu in amusement. Just as he was about to say that he had succeeded in the challenge, he saw Li Hong walk over. At the same time, he saw a young man with sharp eyes walking side by side with Li Hong. "Cousin, is he Zhuanyan Xue?" From the looks of it, he should have given up on the challenge. "This way, you can rest assured. He's fine, and it won't affect the reputation of our Void Yama family." Li Shuo chuckled, and his tone carried a trace of disdain. He looked down on this kind of bravado the most. If this Zhuanyan Xue had chosen to challenge Go Yi, who was ranked 10th on the Void Yama divine list, and fearlessly fought with Go Yi's projection clone, even if he died in the end, he might still admire him. Unfortunately, this so-called Zhuanyan Xue was just a bluff. He didn't even dare to fight with Go Yi's projection clone. He was simply a coward. Li Hong was also rather disappointed. Although she heaved a sigh of relief when she saw that Zhuowen was not dead, at the same time, she felt contempt for Zhuowen in her heart. "Zhuanyan Xue, I think you should think twice before you do anything in the future. Not only did you lose the 30,000 chaos crystals by doing such a brainless thing, but it's also very easy for others to look down on you." Li Hong walked over to Zhuowen and sighed softly as she advised. Zhuowen revealed a look of surprise. He didn't understand what Li Hong meant. He frowned slightly and said, "Miss Li Hong, I don't understand what you mean. I shouldn't have lost the 30,000 chaos crystals. I think I've profited. Moreover, I've always done things after careful consideration. I've really never done such a brainless thing as you've said." Zhuowen felt that Li Hong was a little strange. She'd said such a bunch of strange things as soon as she'd come over. What was she talking about? "Zhuanyan Xue, cousin Li Hong has good intentions. You're treating good intentions as ill intent. Look at you, you paid 30,000 chaos crystals to challenge Go Yi, and then you gave up on the challenge. Isn't that a brainless thing to do? What are you still pretending for?" Li Shuo curled his lips and spoke with slight displeasure. Zhuowen glanced indifferently at Li Shuo and said, "If you don't understand the situation, can you please shut up?" Li Shuo was furious and wanted to teach Zhuowen a lesson, but he was stopped by Li Hong. "Cousin, he's a guest after all. How can you be so rude?" Li Hong said in a low voice. Li Shuo finally calmed down. He coldly glanced at Zhuowen and said, "I won't lower myself to your level. After all, today is a great day for me to enter the 50th place on the Void Yang divine list. I can't let you spoil my fun." After saying that, Li Shuo and Li Hong were about to leave. However, they suddenly realized that Elder Anshi, who was at the central counter, had suddenly walked over quickly. "Elder Anshi." Li Shuo and Li Hong hurriedly bowed. Elder Anshi was a person of virtue and prestige. Since he was in charge of the Void Yang divine list, it was obvious that his status was high. It wasn't something that the two of them could compare with. Elder Anshi nodded slightly at the two of them, then walked past them and went straight to Zhuowen. Behind Elder Anshi, the beautiful maidservant who led Zhuowen followed closely. "Little brother, can you give me your card? I may need to see the battle in the challenge room," Elder Anshi said with a pleasant expression. After receiving the report from the beautiful maidservant, Elder Anshi immediately could not sit still. Although the change of the top 10 on the Void Yang divine list was a big deal, it was not enough to make Elder Anshi so concerned. The reason why he was so cautious was that the beautiful maidservant had reported that Zhuowen had only challenged Go Yi for a short period of time. What did this mean? Being able to defeat Go Yi in such a short time meant that this boy had completely crushed Go Yi and easily defeated his projection avatar. In Old Man and Shi's impression, only the top 5 geniuses in the top 10 of the Void Yama divine list could crush Go Yi. They were all dragons and phoenixes among men. How could he not care about such geniuses? Chapter 4396. Sure. Zhuo Wen didn't try to hide it. He handed the card to old man Anshi without hesitation. Thank you, little brother. Go to the VIP lounge and wait for me. I will come to you later. Old man Anshi took the token, and a smile appeared on his wrinkled and serious face. He winked at the maid beside him and hurried back to the central counter. VIP, please follow me. I will take you to the VIP lounge. The beautiful maid showed a respectful look and gestured for Zhuowen to follow her. This is my man. Can he follow me to the VIP lounge? Zhuowen pointed at Xiao Yu and asked. The beautiful maid smiled brightly and said, since they are your people, they are naturally qualified to go with you. Xiao Yu had a look of disbelief on his face. The VIP lounge was the most luxurious place here. This was a hall specially prepared for the top 10 geniuses of the Void Yama God list or the true big shots of Void Yama God City. Why would old man Anshi suddenly invite Zhuo Wen to the VIP lounge? Moreover, Xiao Yu didn't expect that he would have the honor of entering. Xiao Yu, let's go together. Zhuo Wen turned around and spoke. Only then did Xiao Yu wake up as if he had just woken up from a dream. He was so excited that his face flushed red. His footsteps were still a little shaky as he followed Zhuo Wen into another hall. VIP lounge? Are you kidding me? Why did old man Anshi let this coward into the VIP lounge? Li Shuo was so shocked that his jaw almost fell off. Li Hong was also in disbelief. She looked at old man Anshi who was busy at the central counter and said to Li Shuo, cousin, let's ask old man Anshi. Li Shuo nodded. They could only ask old man Anshi now. Both of them were not convinced. They felt that Xuanyuanxue was not qualified to enter the VIP lounge. They had always wanted to enter the VIP lounge but could not. Why was Xuanyuanxue allowed to enter? At this moment, old man Anshi took Zhuowen's card and placed it on a small altar on the counter. Many lines appeared on the altar. The runes flew out and floated in the air. They were like long snakes that drilled into old man Anshi's forehead. Old man Anshi closed his eyes and silently watched the scene of the battle that appeared in his mind. Especially when he saw Zhuo Wen easily kill Go Yi in the state of demonized. Old man Anshi opened his eyes, and a sharp light burst out from them. This kid is not simple. Old man Anshi was moved. He could naturally tell that Zhuowen's cultivation level was only at the late stage of the cosmic tribulation. But this boy's Chenkuan world was so different, and his strength was so unexpected. Old man Anshi's eyes grew brighter and brighter. Perhaps, this person was the suitable candidate that he had been looking for. Lady Anshi. Why was Xuanyuanxue able to enter the VIP lounge? As soon as Anshi opened his eyes, he saw Li Hong and Li Shuo in front of the counter. It was Li Hong who asked the question. Because he is qualified to enter. Old man Anshi resumed his indifferent attitude and said flatly, that's impossible. He's not one of the top 10 geniuses on the Shuyang divine list. How could he be qualified? Li Shuo frowned. Old man Anshi said with some displeasure, from now on, Xuanyuanxue is the new 10th on the Shuyang divine list. He successfully defeated Go Yi, so he is qualified. If you are not convinced, you can challenge the top 10 on the Shuyang divine list yourselves. Li Hong and Li Shuo looked at each other as if they had been hit hard. The two of them sat down in a daze in a corner of the hall. It took them a long time to come back to their senses. Then, the two of them looked at each other and quickly rushed out of the hall, all the way until they arrived in front of the huge stone tablet at the front of the temple. At this moment, they found that an astonishing number of young cultivators had gathered in front of the stone tablet. All of them were pointing at the stone tablet. For so many years, the top 10 on the Shuyang divine list has never changed, but today it has changed. Who is this Zhuo? What a strange name. This is big news. The 10th place on the Shuyang divine list is occupied by someone I have never heard of. It's unbelievable. Li Hong and Li Shuo looked at the 10th place on the Void Yama God ranking list and found that Go Yi's name was no longer there. Instead, it was replaced by the word Zhuo. Go Yi fell to the 11th place. The two immediately thought of Xuanyuanxue. Combined with old man Anshi's words, the two looked at each other and smiled bitterly. It turned out that the two of them were the ones who thought they were infallible and had their own wishful thinking. When they recalled the words they had said to Zhuowen earlier, their faces burned as if they had been slapped a few times. "Why don't we apologize to Zhuowen?" Li Hong said with shame. Li Shuo was silent for a moment and sighed. "We do need to apologize. Moreover, the competition between the three great families is imminent. We can recruit this person to fight for our Shu Yang family. Our Shu Yang family can't afford to lose anymore. If we continue to lose, the Divine Void Spring will be completely taken away by the Shulong family and Shu Qi family." Li Hong's beautiful eyes lit up. Li Shuo's suggestion was good. This Zhuowen strength was not bad. Perhaps they could really recruit her. "Let's go in and wait for Zhuowen." After Li Hong finished speaking, the two of them returned to the main hall of the temple and silently waited for Zhuowen. In the VIP lounge, Xiao Yu sat beside Zhuowen. He was extremely nervous and uneasy. Zhuowen remained composed instead, and he looked around the surroundings. He noticed that this VIP lounge was indeed much higher class than the ordinary halls outside. Moreover, the environment was quiet, and every single place had a corresponding beautiful female attendant on standby at all times. After a while, old man Anshi walked in. He walked towards Zhuowen with a smile on his face and sat down across from Zhuowen. "Zhuowen, with your strength, you can choose a genius who is at the front. Do you still plan to challenge?" Old man Anshi picked up the tea on the table and took a sip. He smiled at Zhuowen. "Not at all. I came to challenge the Void Yama Divine list to test my true strength. Now I have a rough idea of what level my strength is at." Zhuowen smiled faintly. Old man Anshi smiled and put down the teacup in his hand. He pondered and said, "The change of the top 10 of the Void Yama Divine list is a major event in Void Yama City. Since you defeated Go Yi, you should receive the corresponding reward. However, the reward will not be given by me. It will be decided by the Void Yama. I will report this matter to the Void Yama. After he replies, the reward will be sent here. At that time, I will inform you to come and receive the reward. Before that, let's exchange contact information so that I can get in touch with you as soon as the reward is given out." Zhuowen did not suspect anything. He took out the communication jade and exchanged contact information with old man Anshi. After exchanging some pleasantries with Zhuowen, old man Anshi stood up and said with a smile, "This old man still has some trivial matters to attend to, so I will take my leave first. If little brother Zhuo has any requests, feel free to mention them to the maidservants here." Zhuowen smiled and said, "No need. I also have some matters to attend to. I will take my leave first." Chapter 4397. After Zhuowen walked out of the VIP lounge, just as he was about to leave the temple, he was stopped by people. "What else do you guys have?" Zhuowen looked at Li Hong and Li Shuo blocking in front of him, his brows furrowed slightly as he said. Li Hong and Li Shuo exchanged a glance and said, "Young Master Zhuo, we were presumptuous just now. Under the situation where we didn't understand what happened, we made wild guesses about you and even believed that we were infallible and misunderstood you. Truly sorry." Zhuowen revealed a surprised look. He originally thought that the two people were here to find trouble, but he did not expect that they actually personally came to apologize to him. "It's just a misunderstanding. The two of you don't have to take it to heart. If there's nothing else, I'll be leaving first." Zhuowen waved his hand and said, "Wait a moment, young Master Zhuo. We actually have something to ask of you." Li Hong hurriedly opened her mouth, her face still somewhat embarrassed. "What is it?" Zhuowen's brows raised up and he asked. "Has young Master Zhuo heard of the Divine Void Mountain Spring?" Li Hong deliberated for a while and asked probingly. "Divine Void Mountain Spring? I indeed know about this." Zhuowen's gaze flickered as he said with a nod. Back then, Shuju had once promised him to let him and Duan Jipeng enter the Divine Void Mountain Spring to cultivate. It could greatly increase cultivation speed. Li Hong let out a light breath and continued, "Young Master Zhuo, the matter we asked of you, the reward is the Divine Void Mountain Spring. Even if this matter fails, Elder cousin Li Shuo and I are willing to give our share of the divine Void Mountain Spring to you. Zhuowen's brows raised up. He faintly guessed what Li Hong was asking of him for. Related to the three great families' grand competition? Zhuowen asked with a smile. He had once heard Ziyang mention before that the majority of the divine Void Mountain Spring's share was controlled by the three great families as well as the Void Yama King's faction. Therefore, every once in a while, the three great families would hold a grand competition for the junior generation, using this to redistribute the divine Void Mountain Spring's share. It was just that in the Void family's recent 100 years, the number of talents in the junior generation had dwindled. Several grand competitions lost, causing the Void family's share of the divine Void Mountain Spring to decrease. And as the share of divine Void Mountain Spring decreased, the amount of divine Void Mountain Spring distributed to the younger generation of the Void family also decreased year by year. This caused the gap between the younger generation and the other two great families to grow increasingly large. On the Void Yama god list, the strongest member of the younger generation of the Void Yama family, Li Ying, was only ranked 6th. From this, it could be seen that the younger generation of the Void Yama family was far inferior to the other two great families. Li Hong said somewhat dejectedly, "Looks like young Master Zhuo also knows. The Void Dragon aristocratic family and the Void Qi aristocratic family have won far too many shares of the divine Void Spring from our Void Edge aristocratic family. Especially the Void Dragon family. They have already won first place several times in a row. The share of divine Void Mountain Spring they have is already 3 times that of our Void family. The competition this time is about to arrive. If our Void Wall clan loses as well, then I'm afraid the younger generation will really be unable to recover from this setback." Speaking of this, Li Hong's eyes were filled with hope. She looked expectantly at Zhuowen and said, "Young Master Zhuo, since you can enter 10th place on the Void Yama god list, it can be seen that your strength is at the top even among the younger generation of the Void Yama realm. If you can represent our Void Edge aristocratic family to participate in this competition between the 3 great families, our Void Edge aristocratic family might not be at the bottom this time. Moreover, even if our Void Edge aristocratic family is at the bottom again this time, my cousin and I are willing to give our share of divine Void Mountain Spring to you. We definitely won't let you work for nothing." Zhuowen glanced at Li Hong and Li Shuo. He could see the sincerity in their eyes. "You can't make the decision on this matter. Go back and report to your patriarch first. If he agrees, I still have to discuss the specific details of the remuneration with him. I can't rashly agree right now," Zhuowen said after a moment of consideration. Li Hong and Li Shuo let out a sigh of relief. In their opinion, since Zhuowen didn't immediately refuse, it meant that he was still somewhat moved. As long as they could convince their patriarch and obtain his agreement, this matter should be settled. Zhuowen suddenly asked, "Right, if you want external assistance, you can ask the other geniuses on the Void Yama god list." "Why must you ask me?" Li Hong smiled bitterly. "The top 10 of the Void Yama god list are basically all young geniuses from the King of Hell, the 3 great families, and the 5 great halls. Geniuses from first-rate forces like them aren't allowed to interfere in the matters and struggles of their respective forces. Moreover, the young cultivators from the other forces are too weak. Even if you ask for external assistance, it won't be of any use." Zhuowen nodded when he heard this, and he said, "All of you return and report this to your patriarchs." After exchanging contact details, Li Hong and Li Shuo bid farewell and left. Zhuowen continued to stroll around Void Yama City under Xiao Yu's lead. 6 hours later, Zhuowen received a message from Ziyang. The latter said that everything was going smoothly and was about to meet up with him. Thus, Zhuowen found a rather quiet tea house and found a reason to ask Xiao Yu to go back first. He sat alone in the tea house, sipping tea as he waited. Not long after, Ziyang arrived. "Master." Ziyang respectfully came to Zhuowen's side. She didn't dare sit down, so she bowed. After the patriarch of the Shueisha family reported this matter, the 9 kings quickly came to a decision. "Our Zishuan clan will continue to control the divine fire source and support the Zishuan clan's punitive expedition against the 13 higher realms. The Shueisha family will be fully responsible for this matter. Ziyang spoke softly as Zhuowen listened quietly. The result was indeed as he had expected. This matter was insignificant to the 9 kings, and they came to a decision so quickly. Moreover, they only handed it over to the Void Yama family to handle. Clearly, they didn't care at all. Where is the divine fire source? Zhuowen asked faintly. Ziyang did not dare to be negligent. She took out a sparkling and translucent jade box. The surface of the jade box seemed to have turned red. Zhuowen could faintly feel the heat inside the jade box, as well as a familiar feeling. Zhuowen waved his sleeve and, under Ziyang's disappointed gaze, put it back into the outside world. The divine fire source had unimaginable benefits for Xiao He. According to Xiao He, with the help of the divine fire source, it wouldn't be long before she could smoothly advance to an 8th order astral soldier. At that time, the power of the sacred sword of Deep Abyss would undergo earth-shattering changes. And Xiao He could use the transformation of the sacred sword of Deep Abyss to advance her cultivation further, directly reaching the 3rd heavenly layer of the eternal realm. Master. The divine fire source is the driving force of the divine worship. After this matter is over, the Void Yama family will give our Purple Jade clan another divine worship according to the 9 kings' instruction. Without the timely replenishment of the divine fire source, the divine worship won't be able to operate normally. At that time, the Void Yama family might notice some clues and expose that the divine fire source isn't in our Purple Jade clan's hands. That would be terrible. Ziyang's attitude was cautious as she softly voiced the concerns in her heart. I will take care of this matter. The divine worship's energy comes from the divine fire source's divine fire source. I will send the required divine fire source back to Purple Jade Holy City on a regular basis. This way, you won't have to worry about the energy problem, Zhuowen said lightly. Ziyang suddenly understood and hurriedly bowed in respect. Master is wise. Chapter 4398. Tell me about the Red Dragon Organization. I need to get in touch with the Red Dragon Organization and ask them to look for an important person. Zhuowen tapped the table with his right hand, suppressing his emotions as he spoke calmly. Ziyang pondered for a moment, then said, the Red Dragon Organization keeps a very low profile in Voidyang Divine City. Although they have secret bases all over the city, they are all extremely secretive. This lowly one knows of a base. If it's convenient for Master, this lowly one can bring Master there directly. Bring me there, Zhuowen said straightforwardly. After paying for the tea, Zhuowen followed Ziyang and left the place. Life of Luxury was one of the top 5 brothels in Voidyang Divine City. The women inside were of all shapes and sizes, and they were all peerless beauties in the outside world. Outside the entrance of Life of Luxury, Zhuowen looked at the dazzling lights in front of him and listened to the chatter inside. He couldn't help but laugh inwardly. He knew that the Red Dragon Organization's base that Ziyang mentioned should be in Life of Luxury. In front of the entrance, there were several brothels waving their flowery handkerchiefs and shouting in unpleasant voices. They were trying their best to win over the male cultivators who walked past the entrance. When Zhuowen and Ziyang arrived at the entrance, the brothels fought to be the first to swarm over. They were all chattering noisily. I'm here to look for Lung Enyang, Ziyang said calmly. When the madams who were originally as enthusiastic as fire heard the words Lung Enyang, they immediately avoided Zhuowen and Ziyang as if they were avoiding the plague. Who are you? Why are you looking for Lung Enyang? One of the brothels, a middle-aged woman with a thick layer of foundation, asked cautiously. Shyness covers her sleeves. Melancholy makes her lazy to put on makeup. It's easy to find a priceless treasure, but hard to find a lover. Ziyang suddenly recited softly. The brothel's expressions changed the instant they heard this poem. The brothels who had questioned Zhuowen and Ziyang looked around cautiously and said, the two of you, come with me. After saying that, the brothel keeper hurriedly entered the brothel. As soon as he entered the brothel, there were many red lights, and the sounds of women chattering by his ears instantly became much clearer. On the railings of the tall buildings on both sides, there were young women in light gauze, with eyebrows like distant mountains, and eyes filled with infinite gentleness. The brothel keeper led Zhuowen and Ziyang quickly through the red-lit hall. After passing through a series of corridors and twists, they finally arrived at a courtyard in the depths of the building. In the courtyard, there was a small bridge over flowing water and pavilions. Beside the small pavilion on the southeast side, there was a small rockery, and below the rockery was a small stream that flowed quietly. Accompanied by the quiet sound of the stream, a clear and melodious sound of a pipa and zither rose up melodiously, and it silently spread throughout the entire courtyard, causing people to feel inexplicably at ease and tranquil. The moment Zhuowen stepped into the courtyard, all the hairs on his body suddenly stood up. His eyes immediately locked on the red-clothed woman sitting quietly in the pavilion. Her slender fingers danced melodiously on the strings of the pipa. She was like a pure and flawless spirit, playing the purest music. Zhuowen's gaze fell on the red-clothed woman, and his expression was quite dignified. He could feel that the red-clothed woman's aura was very strong, no weaker than Ziyang beside him. What made him even more dignified was that this courtyard was like a world of its own. As soon as he entered, it seemed that the atmosphere had become completely different. The outside world was filled with gongs and drums, and the chirping of women. But here, there was only a small bridge over flowing water, and it was so quiet, as if it had become a completely different world. Zhuowen could see at a glance that it was not the strange music that caused the difference between the inside and the outside world, but an extremely powerful array hidden in the courtyard. He keenly sensed that this array should be in existence at the third heavenly layer of the eternal realm. And Zhuowen's inexplicable sense of crisis came from this array. This array was definitely extremely difficult to deal with. The pipa music stopped, and the red-clothed woman raised her head slightly. Her eyes, which were painted with red eyeshadow, sharply fell on Zhuowen and Ziyang. However, the sharpness in her eyes disappeared in a flash, and she quickly regained her calmness. She gently put the pipa and zither aside, slowly stood up, and gracefully bowed. Female Supreme Ziyang, long time no see. Ziyang also hurriedly returned the greeting and said, Leng Enyang, I'll have to trouble you again this time. The red-clothed woman, Leng Enyang, smiled slightly. She did not answer Ziyang's question, but her beautiful eyes fell on Zhuowen, who was beside Ziyang. May I know who this person is? Leng Enyang asked with a smile. He's a trustworthy person, and I'm here again because of him. He has a commission for your Red Dragon sect. Ziyang went straight to the point. Since he's someone you trust, then I'm relieved. Please take a seat, both of you. Leng Enyang raised her right hand, pointed to the front of the pavilion, and made an inviting gesture. The brothel keeper tactfully excused herself. She had been in the life of luxury for so long, so she knew what she should know and what she should not know. If she knew something she should not know, then she would not be able to see the sun again. Zhuowen and Ziyang sat in front of Leng Enyang. The latter rolled up her long sleeves, elegantly poured 2 pots of tea, and handed them over. The Red Dragon sect's motto is to do our best and leave the rest to fate. Little brother, if you have a commission, just say it. I will evaluate the value of your commission, Leng Enyang said with a smile. My commission is very simple. Mobilize your Red Dragon sect's connections and help me find a person in Shuyang Divine City, Zhuowen said calmly. That depends on who it is, Leng Enyang said unhurriedly. Zhuowen took out a piece of paper from his sleeve, handed it to Leng Enyang, and said indifferently, she's my confidant. She was severely injured in the battle with Huang Ju in the newer realm. I accidentally heard that she had come to Shuyang Divine City. However, Shuyang Divine City is too vast, and its population is more than 10 million. It's too difficult to find a person in such a big city. Red Dragon sect, on the other hand, has a large business and a wide network, so I thought of asking you for a commission. I think this shouldn't be too difficult for you. Leng Enyang looked carefully at the portrait in her hand. It was a pitilessly beautiful woman. Her eyes were as gentle as water, and her slender fingers were placed on the strings of a zither in front of her, as if she was playing a peerless piece of music. Since she was able to fight with Huang Ju, she must have the battle prowess of an ancient starlight. Moreover, in order to avoid the eyes of the newer clan, she can't show her face even in Shuyang Divine City. Her movements must be secretive. It's very risky to find such an expert. Lung Enyang gently put down the portrait in her hand and looked at Zhuowen with a faint smile. As long as you can find her, the price is not a problem, Zhuowen said calmly. Chapter 4399. If you can take out a treasure of the second sky of the Eternal Realm, I can accept this commission and use all the secret forces of the Red Dragon to find the woman in the portrait. Lung Enyang looked at Zhuowen and said. Ziyang frowned and said, Lung Enyang, it's just a search. There's no danger in this commission. Your price is a bit high. Lung Enyang sneered and said, Female Majesty Ziyang, a search commission seems simple, but in fact, it's not. It depends on what kind of person you are looking for. If it's someone with low strength and stable whereabouts, naturally, it won't cost much. But the person you are looking for is an expert who can fight with Huangju, the great master of the newer realm. She has the strength of the ancient starlight realm. Even the Red Dragon doesn't want to provoke such an expert. If she knows that we are looking for her, our organization will have to take a lot of risk. Hearing this, Ziyang did not refute, but looked at Zhuowen. A treasure of the second sky of the Eternal Realm was extremely precious. Even though she was the female majesty of the Zishen clan, she did not have many treasures of this level. Even if she had, she would keep them in the secret treasury of the Zishen sacred city and would not carry them with her. This bright sun coat of arms is a divine weapon of the second sky of the Eternal Realm. It has a strong defensive power. This reward should be enough. Zhuowen turned his right hand and took out a black and gold coat of arms from the macro world. The coat of arms looked like the sun. When held in the palm, it emitted a soft and sharp light, as if it could dispel all the coldness and evil qi. Zhuowen found a lot of treasures in the starlight world of the 7 emotions and 6 desires Saint Lord, including some divine weapons of the second sky of the Eternal Realm. The bright sun coat of arms was one of them. For Zhuowen, it was of little value. Therefore, Zhuowen did not feel bad about using it as a bargaining chip. Lung Enyang took the bright sun coat of arms and carefully observed it. Her beautiful eyes flashed with a trace of amazement. This luminous sun emblem is indeed a second heavenly layer eternal divine weapon. In that case, we Red Dragon will accept your request. A smile appeared on Lung Enyang's face. She returned the luminous sun emblem to Zhuowen and continued, let's sign the contract. I'll inform you when we get the exact information of the person in the portrait. At that time, you'll need to give me the luminous sun emblem. Zhuowen put away the coat of arms and the corners of his mouth curled up. He quickly established a contract with Lung Enyang. After exchanging contact information, Lung Enyang chuckled. Young Master Zhuo, when I have a clue, I will inform you immediately. Also, Life of Luxury is a famous brothel in Void-Yang Divine City. If young Master Zhuo is interested, I can arrange for one of the most popular girls here to accompany you. Moreover, it will be free of charge. Lung Enyang looked at Zhuowen flirtatiously with a flirtatious smile at the corner of her mouth. Zhuowen shook his head and said, such a wonderful thing, this Zhuo probably doesn't have the fortune to enjoy it. I still have important matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave first. Lung Enyang didn't force Zhuowen. Instead, she called the previous brothel keeper to send Zhuowen and Ziyang out of Life of Luxury. After Zhuowen and Ziyang left, the courtyard was silent. Lung Enyang took out a token from her sleeve and casually threw it in the shadow behind the rockery. She said indifferently, pass down my order. Let the intelligence department investigate the whereabouts and origin of this Moyan Wushang. Also, investigate this Zhuowen for me. It's the first time I've seen someone who can take out a second sky of the Eternal Realm treasure without batting an eyelid. As soon as Lung Enyang's voice fell, a sticky black shadow flashed out from the shadow of the rockery. It carried the token and flew away at an extremely fast speed. Not long after Zhuowen and Ziyang returned to the residence arranged by the Shuming family, Li Hong and Li Shuo came to visit. Oh, your family had agreed to meet with me? After listening to the news brought back by Li Hong, Zhuowen nodded without surprise. Yes. Young Master Zhuo, please follow us to the living room. Li Hong smiled. Okay, please lead the way. Zhuowen got up and walked straight to the living room of the Shuming family under the lead of Li Hong and Li Shuo. Ziyang didn't follow. When they arrived at the living room, Zhuowen found that there weren't many people in the living room. There were only 3 people. Sitting in the main seat was a dignified old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion. He wore a black and white robe, and 3 strands of snow-white long beard hung in front of his chest. This man was the current head of the Shuming family, Li Yinglong. His cultivation was unfathomable. In the Mirage realm, he was a top master. Zhuowen stepped into the living room. The moment his eyes fell on Li Yinglong, his hair stood on end and his heart beat faster. At that moment, his innate intuition told him that the old man sitting in the main seat was extremely dangerous. It was the kind of danger that could kill him. Zhuowen forcibly suppressed the fear in his heart. The pressure that Li Yinglong gave him was far greater than that of Long Piyu and Lang Enyang. In other words, Li Yinglong's cultivation was definitely above the peak of the inverse ancient starlight realm. Then, there was only one possibility. This person's cultivation might have reached the 4th stage of the great carefree realm, lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. So this is a transcendent realm? He's just the head of one of the 3 great families, but he's an expert of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Then what about the Shuming Yama who stands at the top? Wouldn't he be even more powerful? Zhuowen was more and more amazed by the power of a superdomain, but his face didn't show any abnormality. Zhuowen greets the head of the Li family. After Zhuowen entered the reception hall, he gracefully bowed to Li Yinglong, who was sitting on the main seat. Li Yinglong silently sized up Zhuowen and said with a smile, "There's no need to be so polite. Young Master Zhuo, please take a seat. I've heard the younger generation of the family often mention you. They say how powerful you are, and how you defeated Go Yi's projection doppelganger in the Void Yama divine list. Is this true?" "This is true. The current 10th place on the Void Yama divine list is me. Miss Li Hong once asked me to represent your Shuming family in the competition between the 3 great families. This is a matter of great importance. Only you can make the decision, so I'd like to see what you think," Zhuowen said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. "If I'm not wrong, your cultivation is only at the late stage of the great calamity of heaven and earth. How did you defeat Go Yi with such a cultivation?" A young man sitting in the main seat asked curiously. Zhuowen glanced at the young man. He knew that this young man was able to sit in the main seat next to Li Yinglong at such a young age. It could be seen how important he was to Li Yinglong. "This is my private matter. If you don't believe me, you can ask Elder Anshi for confirmation," Zhuowen said indifferently. "Of course we trust old man Anshi. I'm sure our young friend Zhuo must have something extraordinary about him. If Zhuo Xiaoyu joins the competition, it will be a great help to our Shuming family. Li Hong told me that you want to discuss the details with me face to face. I wonder what your conditions are." Li Yinglong smiled. Chapter 4400. My condition is very simple. If the Void Wall clan is able to win a share of the Divine Void Spring in the competition, then I want 30% by myself. If we're unable to win a share and even lose, then I don't want a share. Zhuowen spoke in a low voice. When they heard Zhuowen, it wasn't just Li Yinglong, even Li Hong, Li Shuo, and the others felt that it was strange. If Zhuowen's condition was placed on the Void Wall clan that had dominated the competition for a long time, then it would be an excessive condition. But when placed on the Void Wall clan that had been at the bottom of the competition for a long time, this condition was even beneficial to the Void Wall clan. Now, everyone knew that the Void Wall clan was in a disadvantageous position in the competition. Even this time, many powers didn't look favorably upon the Void Wall clan. In other words, the probability of the Void Wall clan losing a share of the Divine Void Spring in the competition was much higher. But Zhuowen still proposed such a condition. This person was either too arrogant and conceited, or he didn't recognize the Void Wall clan's awkward position at all. "Zhuo Xiaoyu, are you sure this is the condition?" Li Yinglong asked with a strange expression. "I'm sure. Or does Patriarch Li think this condition of mine is going too far?" Zhuowen smiled faintly. Li Yinglong pondered for a moment and said, "This condition isn't going too far at all. On the contrary, it's our Void Wall clan that benefit. I presume you're aware of the situation of our Voidwall clan amongst the three great clans. Our Voidwall clan won't mistreat friends that are friendly to our clan. How about this? Even if your Voidwall clan loses this competition, I'll still give you a certain amount of compensation. I think this condition is quite reasonable. Zhuowen was slightly stunned. He hadn't expected that Li Yinglong would be so generous, and this caused Zhuowen's feelings to be slightly complicated. Then thank you, Patriarch Li. Zhuowen bowed deeply. Li Yinglong waved his hand to indicate that Zhuowen didn't have to be so courteous. At the same time, he pointed at the young man sitting below and introduced him with a smile. He's called Li Ying, and he's the leading figure of our Voidwall clan's younger generation. The main force will be relying on the two of you in the competition this time. I hope the two of you can work together and bring honor to my Void clan. Li Ying nodded at Zhuowen. His expression was quite cold. He had no intention of getting close to Zhuowen. Next, Li Yinglong told Zhuowen about the grand competition and the specific date of the competition. After that, Zhuowen took the initiative to bid farewell and left the guest hall with Li Hong and Li Shuo. Patriarch. Although Zhuowen is strong, she is only ranked 10th on the Void Yama god list. She will not be of much use to us in this competition. After all, the virtual corona of the Shulong family and Mi Liang of the Shuqi family are too strong. Even I am not their match, let alone him. Our Void Realm family has no use for this person. After Zhuowen left, Li Ying, who was sitting next to Li Yinglong, couldn't help but complain. Li Yinglong's eyes revealed a wise and far-sighted light as she said indifferently, Li Ying, your vision is still not far-sighted enough. Zhuowen current strength is indeed unable to help our Void Realm family in this competition. However, this child's talent is definitely above yours. According to my observation, his cultivation time is shorter than yours, virtual corona, and Mi Liang's. Moreover, it is much shorter. However, he was able to enter the top 10 on the Void Yama god list. His potential is great. Although he can't help us now, he might be able to help us in the future. To our Voidwall family, having one more friend with potential is better than having one more enemy. Li Ying's pupils shrank. He was somewhat unconvinced. Li Yinglong actually said that this child's talent was greater than his. For someone as proud and arrogant as him, this was somewhat difficult to accept. However, Li Ying did not refute. After all, Li Yinglong was the patriarch. If he refuted him again and again, he would only annoy him. However, Li Ying was somewhat unhappy with Zhuowen. Young Master Zhuo, congratulations. We will be teammates in the grand competition in 10 days. Li Shuo laughed heartily as he walked out of the living room. Zhuowen smiled and chatted casually with Li Hong and Li Shuo along the way. When they returned to their residence, Li Hong and Li Shuo bid farewell and left. After returning to his residence, Zi Yang hurriedly came over to welcome him. She had also heard the news that Zhuowen was going to participate in the grand competition of the three great families. Zi Yang, return to the Zixian realm first. After I finish my business here, I will go down to look for you. At that time, we will go on a punitive expedition to the 13 higher realms. Zhuowen said to Zi Yang. Zi Yang naturally would not disobey Zhuowen's orders. The next day, she bid farewell to Zhuowen and returned to the Zixian realm with the new divine warship. After that, Zhuowen stayed in his residence, waiting for news from Leng Ernyang and for the grand competition of the three great families to begin. Zhuowen did not know that during this period of time, his fake name, Zhuo, had begun to spread rapidly in Voidyang Divine City. Soon, everyone knew about it. Most of the cultivators in Voidyang Divine City knew that the 10th place on the Voidyang Divine list had changed hands. Go Yi had been replaced by a mysterious cultivator called Zhuo. There were even rumors that on the second day after the 10th place on the Voidyang Divine list changed hands, the young hall master of the Holy Azure Divine Hall, Go Yi, came out of seclusion and went to the Voidyang Divine list to challenge the 10th place again. It was said that Go Yi went in standing, but came out lying down. At that time, many cultivators in the hall of the Voidyang Divine list saw it clearly. This also caused Go Yi to lose a lot of face. After being carried back, he never came back to challenge a second time. In a luxurious pavilion within the Xulong family, Xu Ju was dressed in a silk robe with the help of a beautiful maid. He looked at the servant kneeling in front of him in surprise. You said that the 10th place on the Void Yang divine list has changed hands, and the new 10th place is called Xue? Xu Ju's eyes narrowed slightly, an undetectable sharpness in them. After returning to the Xulong family, he no longer suppressed his cultivation and smoothly reached the universe tribulation. He also obtained his father's permission to enter the secret realm to train. The secret realm controlled by the Xulong family was very strange. The flow of time inside was different from the outside world. A day outside was a year inside the secret realm. However, the secret realm was full of danger. Many of the Xulong family's juniors had entered the secret realm to train, but they all died. Xu Ju had also encountered many dangers in there. Fortunately, he had many trump cards, was cautious enough, and was extremely talented. Thus, he had successfully completed the trial in the end. The moment he walked out of the secret realm, Xu Ju was reborn. His cultivation rose from the early stage of the universe tribulation to the peak of the universe tribulation. After coming out of seclusion, Xu Ju immediately went to the Void Yang divine list to challenge it. In the end, he defeated the 12th genius and took over the place. Xu Ju was very concerned about the recent change in the 10th place on the Void Yang divine list. When he learned that the new 10th place was called Xue, he immediately thought of a person. Describe this person's appearance and characteristics to me, Xu Ju ordered. The servant kneeling in front of Xu Ju didn't dare tarry and hurriedly described Xuewen's appearance. The more Xu Ju listened, the tighter his brows furrowed. He muttered to himself, this person's demonic qi is monstrous. He's a young demonic cultivator. His attacks are completely different from Xuewen's. Are they not the same person? Chapter 4401. Time passed day by day. Xuewen stayed in his residence and rarely came out. Occasionally, Li Shuo and Li Hong would visit Xuewen and ask him some questions about cultivation. Although Xuewen's cultivation was the same as theirs, he was still ranked 10th on the Void Yama divine list. With his strength in front of them, they didn't treat him with the same arrogance as they did their peers. After Xuewen answered their questions about cultivation and enlightened them, the two of them admired Xuewen even more. Although they were also cultivators of the universe tribulation, Xuewen's understanding of cultivation far surpassed theirs. Often, his casual words would make them think deeply and benefit them a lot. On the 10th day, Li Shuo and Li Hong came to Xuewen's house as usual and knocked on Xuewen's door. After receiving the servant's notice, Xuewen walked out leisurely. He looked towards the southeast with a hint of worry in his eyes. It had been 10 days, but there was still no news from Leng Ernyang. This made Xuewen quite disappointed. Seeing that Moyan Wushang had hidden himself well, even the Red Dragon, the largest secret organization in Void Yama Divine City, didn't have any clues for a while. Young Master Xue, today is the day of the large competition. The Patriarch has summoned us to the open space in the reception hall. As soon as Xuewen came out, Li Hong and Li Shuo greeted him. The two of them walked side by side with Xuewen. Xuewen smiled faintly and said, I wonder how the competition this time will be held. Li Hong smiled bitterly and said, the format of every large competition is different. We are not sure about this large competition. After we gather, the Patriarch should announce the format of this large competition. Xuewen nodded and didn't dwell on this topic. Instead, he chatted casually with Li Hong and Li Shuo. Soon, the three of them arrived at the open space outside the reception hall. At this moment, many young cultivators had gathered in the open space. They were basically the younger generation of the Voidwall family, and all of their faces were brimming with excitement. At the front of the open space, Shel Ying stood there like a javelin. Perhaps he had noticed the arrival of Xuewen and the others. He casually glanced at them and nodded slightly at Xuewen. His attitude was quite cold. Then, he turned his head and looked straight ahead. Xuewen stared at Li Ying's back. For some reason, he felt that Li Ying's gaze was hostile towards him. This made Xuewen feel strange. He didn't seem to have offended Li Ying before. Li Hong, Li Shuo, After Li Hong and Li Shuo followed Zhuowen into the open space, many young cultivators from the Void Realm aristocratic family who were familiar with Li Hong and Li Shuo greeted them warmly. After they finished greeting each other, they all looked curiously at Zhuowen, who was standing beside Li Hong and Li Shuo. In fact, they had already received news a few days ago that their Void Realm aristocratic family had invited an outsider for the competition between the three great families. Moreover, this outsider was the newly ranked 10th on the Void Yama god list, Shuo, who had recently become the talk of the town. Is he that Shuo? Impossible, his cultivation isn't much stronger than ours. It's only the great calamity of universe. In the open space, many young cultivators looked at Zhuowen and whispered to each other, their eyes filled with doubt. Although the mysterious Shuo was quite famous in Void Yama Divine City recently, they didn't know much about him, much less what his cultivation was like. They only knew that he had defeated Go Yi's projection clone. They subconsciously thought that this mysterious Shuo was at least at the cosmic manifestation level. Otherwise, how could he have defeated Go Yi? Now that they found out that Shuo was only at the great calamity of universe, they began to doubt the authenticity of this person. Zhuowen naturally saw the doubts of the surrounding people, but he didn't pay too much attention to them. At this moment, crisp footsteps came from the depths of the guest hall, causing the whispers on the open space to fall completely silent. Li Yinglong's straight figure slowly walked out from the depths of the hall. Everyone, the location of this grand competition has been decided. It will be held in the east of the city, Donglai Floating City. Unlike the past, the number of people participating in this grand competition has been limited. Only 5 people can participate, Li Yinglong said straightforwardly. As soon as these words were spoken, the open space was filled with an uproar. Many of the younger generation who had been looking forward to participating in the grand competition frowned, revealing disappointed expressions. In the previous grand competition, there was actually no limit to the number of participants. As long as the younger generation was ambitious, they could sign up. The competition between the younger generation of the 3 great families was also based on a point system, and the competition was also free. Therefore, in the previous grand competition, most of the younger generation of the Void Yama family had signed up to participate. Although the Void Yama family was still at the bottom in the end, many of the younger generation had benefited greatly. After the competition, they had gained a lot. This time, the rules had been completely changed, causing them to feel rather disappointed. There were only 5 spots, so they could only choose the 5 most outstanding members of the younger generation of the Void Yama family, and most of them would not have the chance to participate. Li Shuo and Li Hong became nervous as well. Although the 2 of them were ranked at the top of the younger generation of the Void Yama family, because of the addition of Zhuowen, the 2 of them had the risk of not being selected. I've actually already chosen the 5 people. These 5 people are Li Ying, Li Zi, Li Yu, Li Shuo, and the external aide that I've invited this time, Xuanyanxue. Li Yinglong said indifferently. As soon as these words were spoken, many of the younger generation cultivators in the open space lowered their heads in disappointment. Cousin, don't be sad. With your talent, you'll definitely have a chance to be selected in the next grand competition. Li Shuo patted the dejected Li Hong on the shoulder and hurriedly comforted her in a soft voice. Li Hong forced a smile and looked seriously at Li Shuo and Zhuowen. Cousin, young Master Zhuo, I can only rely on the 2 of you in this grand competition. I'll cheer for you. Don't worry, I'll definitely do my best. Li Shuo gave her a thumbs up and smiled brightly. Zhuowen nodded. He was thinking about how to win for the Void Yama family without exposing himself. He had already received news that Shu Ju of the Void Yama family was very likely to participate in this grand competition. With Shu Ju's craftiness, he should have already told the Void Yama family's patriarch about him and all his characteristics after returning to the Void Yama family. Once he was exposed, not only would the Void Yama family attack him, but the family behind Ziyu would also not let him go. Not to mention the forces behind Old Man Ming Deng and the others would come looking for him because of the map fragments. Although Zhuowen was in the state of demonic corruption, outsiders might not be able to recognize that it was his move even if he used the same move. But to be cautious, Zhuowen still considered not using his previous moves as much as possible. Fortunately, he had obtained many of the 7 emotions, 6 desires, Holy Lord's supernatural powers from the Starlight World. During his seclusion in the Void Yama family, he had cultivated some of the 7 emotions, 6 desires, Holy Lord's supernatural powers and had basically mastered them. Chapter 4402. Master, I'm not convinced. Suddenly, an untimely voice sounded in the open space. A sturdy young man slowly walked out. He knelt on one knee in front of Li Yinglong and said in a deep voice, I have no objection to the first 4 candidates, but I don't think the 5th one is suitable. Why is it not suitable? Li Yinglong asked without surprise. The sturdy young man suddenly pointed to Zhuowen and said, Master, the cultivation of the foreign aid you invited is too low. I don't believe that he is the mysterious Shuo who is ranked 10th on the Void Yama divine list. Although his name is Zhuanyenxue and his surname is Shuo, all these are his one-sided words. Has he ever shown his true strength? Just based on his words alone, who knows if he is really that mysterious Shuo? Li Hong frowned and shouted, Li Fei, what do you mean? Cousin Li Shuo and I saw it with our own eyes on the Void Yama divine list. Do you think we will lie? The young man named Li Fei sneered, Li Hong, even if you and Li Shuo testify, what's the use? Maybe you colluded with each other? Anyway, there is no proof. I don't believe it. After all, his cultivation is too low. It's hard to believe. As soon as Li Fei said this, many young people in the open space whispered and pointed at Zhuowen. If Zhuowen's cultivation was at the cosmic Laksana, they would not doubt Zhuowen like this. However, Zhuowen's cultivation was too low. They could not help but doubt him. In this world, everyone only believed what they saw. Otherwise, no matter how reasonable it was, as long as they had doubts, they would maliciously speculate in the worst way. Who is this Li Fei? Zhuowen asked Li Shuo beside him. Li Shuo smiled bitterly and said, Li Fei used to be my competitor. At that time, we were neck and neck. A few days ago, I successfully entered the 50th place on the Void Yama divine list and surpassed Li Fei. Li Fei must be very unhappy with me. And if you don't ask for foreign aid, the 5th place should be his. Maybe he is dissatisfied with you because of this. Hearing this, Zhuowen also understood why Li Fei suddenly found fault with him. What do I have to do to convince you? Zhuowen suddenly said. Hu Fei laughed savagely and said, it's very simple. So long as you're able to defeat me, then you'll have the qualifications to obtain the 5th position. If it weren't for the fact that the patriarch was deceived by you, the 5th spot would have been mine. Zhuowen glanced at Li Yinglong, who was standing on the steps, and saw that he was just watching quietly. He knew that Li Yinglong was not going to intervene. It seemed that this so-called battle of proof was unavoidable. Zhuowen rubbed his temples and said helplessly, since that's the case, then make your move. As long as you can push me back by half a step, I'll consider my loss and return the quota to you. Li Fei's cultivation level was only at the late stage of the cosmic tribulation. In theory, it was the same as Zhuowen's cultivation level on the surface. However, Zhuowen did not take Li Fei seriously at all. With his current strength, he could kill Li Fei with one slap. There was no challenge at all. Don't be so arrogant. You're only at the late stage of the cosmic tribulation. Do you really think you're so great? Hu Fei was furious, and many of the younger generation of the Xuesheng aristocratic family were also dissatisfied. Hu Fei was the representative of the younger generation of the Xuesheng aristocratic family. Now, Zhuowen actually looked down on the former. This was also looking down on them in disguise. Li Fei, teach him a lesson. He's only at the late stage of the cosmic tribulation. Didn't he say that he would win if he could push him back by half a step? Just defeat him and trample him under your feet. Let's see if he can still be so arrogant. Yes, Li Fei, when have you ever been humiliated like this? You can't let this bastard ride on your head like this. Defeat him, knock him to the ground, and then return the favor. Many of the young cultivators of the Xuesheng aristocratic family in the surroundings began to shout and jeer. They looked at Zhuowen with unfriendly gazes. At the same time, They consciously retreated to the edge of the open space, giving Hu Fei and Zhuowen a place to fight. Zhuowen stood firmly on the spot, looked at Hu Fei and said, "Make your move. You're really courting death. Since that's the case, don't blame me for being impolite." Li Fei saw that Zhuowen really intended to stand there and accept his attack, which made him even angrier. He roared and took a step forward. The aura of the late stage of the cosmic tribulation surged out like an erupting volcano. A huge Chenkuan realm appeared in the void behind him. And in the cosmic world, there were dense and incomparably terrifying thunderbolts surging. Boom! Suddenly, all the thunderbolts in the cosmic world poured down and fell into Li Fei's palm. Hu Fei's right hand was completely wrapped in dense thunderbolts. He quickly rushed towards Zhuowen. His right hand was in the shape of a claw and placed at his side. The faint blue thunderbolts constantly flickered, clearly showing his ferocious face. "Thunderous divine palm!" Hu Fei shouted and appeared in front of Zhuowen. His right claw contained endless thunderbolts and fiercely smashed at Zhuowen's chest. Bang! A huge muffled sound resounded in the open space. Zhuowen's entire body was shrouded in terrifying thunderbolts, and his figure was even more blurry. When the lightning dissipated, Li Fei was shocked to find that Zhuowen was still standing in the same spot. His body was surrounded by a faint, viscous black mist, which had blocked all his attacks. What's going on? Why didn't my all-out attack have any effect on him? Hu Fei's pupils constricted, and then he roared again. The cosmic world behind him condensed endless thunderbolts and merged into his palm. Thunderous divine palm! Zhuowen still did not move. Thunderous divine palm! Zhuowen still did not move. Thunderous divine palm! Hu Fei constantly tried to attack Zhuowen, but his attacks were all absorbed and dissolved by the strange black fog on the surface of Zhuowen's body. This made Hu Fei feel powerless, as well as a sense of fear that he had never felt before. Around the open space, many of the young cultivators who originally supported Li Fei were as silent as cicadas in winter. They were not fools. Hu Fei kept attacking Zhuowen, but the latter did not move at all. He did not even take the initiative to attack. This showed how big the gap between the two was. "Did you not eat? Or are you always so weak? You can't even make me take half a step back? I've been waiting for you to let me take a few steps back. This way, I can move my muscles and bones. Unfortunately, you've disappointed me." Zhuowen gently moved his shoulders, and somewhat helplessly launched an attack. He slowly stretched out a finger and gently pointed at Hu Fei's chest. Hu Fei was still in a state of confusion. He first lowered his head and looked at Zhuowen's finger on his chest. Then, he screamed as he felt a strange force explode in front of his chest. Hu Fei's entire body flew into the air, and he fell dozens of meters away in a sorry state. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face was as pale as snow. At this moment, the entire place was silent. Even Hu Ying, who had been silently watching, revealed a rare trace of fluctuation in his calm eyes. Chapter 4403. Alright, everyone has seen Zhuo Xiaoyou's strength. I don't think anyone will doubt him anymore. Li Yinglong, who had been watching coldly from the sidelines, finally spoke up. He looked at Zhuowen with a smile in his eyes, then spoke loudly to the crowd. Li Fei, on the other hand, was extremely ashamed. With the support of several of his friends, he no longer had the face to stay here and left dejectedly. On the open ground, many of the young people who had doubted Zhuowen had become mute. No one dared to speak up against Zhuowen anymore. Since no one objects, let's go to East Lai Floating City. If any of you are interested in watching the grand tournament, just board the divine warship. Li Yinglong clapped his hands, and a medium-sized divine warship came through the air and stopped in the air. On the side of the divine warship's pitch-black hull, a huge gap opened, and a long flight of stairs slowly descended from the gap. Li Yinglong was the first to climb up the stairs and step into the divine warship. Li Ying, Li Zi, Li Yu, Li Shuo, and Zhuowen followed closely behind, followed by a group of young people from the Shuming family who were preparing to watch the tournament. After everyone had boarded the divine warship, it soared into the sky and disappeared from the sky above the Shuming family. Shuyang Divine City was huge. An East Lai floating city was located at the eastern edge of the city. Even with the speed of the divine warship, it would take 15 minutes to reach the city. On the deck, many young people were having a heated discussion. Their topics were very diverse, including the geniuses of the three great families, the specific format of the grand tournament, East Lai floating city, and so on. Zhuowen listened quietly and gradually understood the origin of East Lai floating city. East Lai floating city was said to have been built by the Red Dragon organization, which had expended a lot of manpower and resources. It was originally for the enjoyment of a certain high-ranking member of the Red Dragon organization. At that time, the Red Dragon organization had not been suppressed by the three great families. It was a real power in Shuyang Divine City, second only to the three great families and the King of Hell. Later, for some unknown reason, the three great families suddenly joined forces to suppress the Red Dragon organization. The latter's high-ranking members suffered heavy losses and were forced to go underground, becoming a mysterious and secretive organization. Since then, the Red Dragon organization had been unable to recover. They were like rats hiding in the sores, not daring to act openly in Shuyang Divine City. East Lai Floating City was also divided by the three great families. In addition, many of the Red Dragon organization's properties were also brutally divided by the three great families. Because there was a huge arena in East Arrival Floating City, the three great clans decided to hold the grand competition in East Arrival Floating City every time. On the deck, Li Ying, Zhuo Wen, and the other four geniuses who were participating in the grand competition were arranged at the front of the deck, separated from the other young geniuses by a certain distance. Zhuo TS your name. Li TSSS, STS, STSTS. And what kind of divine ability is that black mist you used to block Li Fei's attack? Li Zi was wearing a purple lace skirt, revealing a pair of snow-white and slender thighs. She slowly walked in front of Zhuowen and asked as if she was familiar with him. Although Li Zi's appearance could not be considered beautiful, she could still be considered a beauty. Especially her skin, which was especially fair and smooth like a cow's, suffused with a faint light. Li Zi's question immediately aroused the curiosity of Li Shuo and Li Yu. Even Li Ying couldn't help but tilt his head slightly, as if he was listening attentively. Just now, the moment Zhuowen used the black mist, they all noticed that Zhuowen's eyes were emitting a demonic red light. That aura was completely the aura of a demonic cultivator. Just as you guessed, I am a demonic cultivator. Isn't it normal for demonic cultivators to use demonic methods? As for what kind of divine ability I used, that's my secret. Zhuowen said calmly. Demonic cultivator. Li Ying silently looked at Zhuowen and fell into deep thought. Li Zi, on the other hand, curled her lips. Zhuowen's rejection of her had angered her, but she did not dare to do anything. Based on the strength that Zhuowen had shown, he was a genuine 10th on the Void Yama god list. Among them, only Li Ying had a chance of winning against Xuanyanxue. She definitely didn't have much of a chance of winning. Li Zi walked over to Li Ying's side and intimately held his arm. She said coquettishly, "What are you being so arrogant for? If the family head did not give you a chance, you would not even have the qualifications to be the external aid of our Void Yama family. After all, he is the 6th genius on the Void Yama divine list. The main character of this competition is him. You are just superfluous to us. In any case, you are definitely not a match for Mi Liang and Virtual Corona." The corner of Li Ying's mouth rose slightly, but he did not speak. He maintained his cold expression and did not even look at Zhuowen. It was as if he did not care about Zhuowen at all. Li Shuo frowned and said unhappily, "Li Zi, what do you mean by that? Lord Zhuo's ranking on the Void Yama divine list is not as high as cousin Li Ying's, but he is much stronger than us. In this competition, even if he cannot win against the Void Yama family, he has a high chance of catching up with the Void Yama family and breaking our record of being last in every competition." Li Zi sneered and said, "Rely on him? Li Shuo, you can't help an outsider. This time, our Void Yama family will definitely win against the Void Yama family because cousin Li Ying has broken through." Hearing this, Li Shuo and Li Yu were first stunned. Then, they looked at Li Ying, who who had maintained his cold expression. Their eyes were filled with surprise. Li Ying's cultivation was already at the peak of the late cosmic Dharma phase. Now that he had broken through, wouldn't he have become a peak cosmic Dharma phase expert? With Li Ying's cultivation, he had enough strength to be in the top 5 of the Void Yama divine list. He even had the strength to fight against the top 3. Li Ying's smile became wider, but he said humbly, "I just broke through by luck. Also, it happened recently, so I didn't have time to go to the Void Yama divine list to test my strength." "That's great. Cousin Li Ying has broken through. This time, our Void Yama family will have a chance to amaze the world," Li Shuo said happily. As expected of cousin Li Ying. "We have hope in this grand competition." Li Yu scratched his head and said with a simple and honest smile. Li Zi had a proud expression, as if she was the one being praised. She even glanced at Zhuowen and purposely said, "That's why I said some people are unnecessary. I'm not wrong, right? With cousin Li Ying here, some people can only serve as a foil." Zhuowen frowned slightly. He looked at the smug Li Zi and wondered where this woman's sense of superiority came from. She even dared to bully him. However, he didn't take it to heart. Instead, he went to the railing at the edge of the deck and silently looked at the sea of clouds in the distance. He wasn't bored to the point of arguing with a strange woman. It was better to not see her and not worry about her. Li Zi thought that Zhuowen was guilty and didn't dare to face them. She became more and more proud, but she didn't go overboard. After all, Li Yinglong was still watching from the bow. Chapter 4404. Li Shuo came to Zhuowen's side and said apologetically, "Young Master Zhuo, please don't take Li Zi's words to heart. She probably didn't mean it." Zhuowen shook his head and smiled, "I'm not that narrow-minded. That should be East Coming Floating City." Hearing this, Li Shuo followed Zhuowen's gaze and looked ahead. There, an incomparably huge floating building appeared before his eyes. The building's exterior resembled a spinning top. The top of the building was a huge circular building while the bottom was a sharp needle. On the surface of the circular building, one pavilion after another was faintly discernible. Rays of dazzling and hidden brilliance flickered on the surface. This was the most famous building in the east of Void Yang Divine City, East Coming Floating City. Below the East Arrival Floating City, there were densely packed buildings and wide streets. On the streets, one could see many people flowing in an endless stream. At the same time, Zhuowen also discovered that there were many divine warships flying in from all directions and entering East Coming Floating City. The grand competition of the 3 great families is considered a grand occasion in Void Yang Divine City. Therefore, every major force would bring their own juniors to observe the competition every time. Of course, outsiders need to buy tickets to enter East Coming Floating City, and the profits from the tickets are split among the 3 great families, Li Shuo said with a smile. Zhuowen rubbed his chin with his right hand. He secretly thought that the 3 great families were quite good at doing business. With so many forces in Void Yang Divine City, they could earn a huge sum of money from the entrance fee just by holding a grand competition. When the divine warship entered East Coming Floating City, it did not stop like the other divine warships. Instead, it continued to move forward and entered the huge arena at the center of East Coming Floating City. When the guards of East Coming Floating City saw the insignia of the Void family on the divine warship, they did not stop it. Instead, they generously allowed it to enter. The arena was very large. It was forged from some kind of ivory-white jade material. At a glance, one could see that the surface of the arena was emitting a soft and pure white halo. It was mysterious and beautiful. The gladiator arena was surrounded by rings of high platforms. There were many seats on the high platforms, and at a glance, there was no problem for hundreds of thousands of people to sit down. In addition, Zhuowen also found that at the highest point of the surrounding high platforms, there were 4 large tower-like buildings. Li Yinglong skillfully docked the divine warship next to the tower-like structure at the top of the high platform on the east side of the arena, allowing it to float to one side. "Get off the boat. This tower belongs to our illusionary family, and it is our base in the Colosseum. It seems like the other 2 aristocratic families haven't arrived yet." Let me tell you the specific format of this competition. Li Yinglong jumped off the divine ship and entered the tower. Li Ying, Li Zi, and the other 4 contestants followed closely behind. As for the rest of the younger generation of the Xuesheng family on the deck, they did not enter the tower. Instead, they very consciously went to the high platform below the tower and found a corresponding place to sit down. At this moment, the gladiator arena was quite deserted. There were only 2 or 3 groups of people sparsely seated on the high platforms around the arena. The arrival of the Xuesheng family's divine warship attracted the attention of these people who had arrived early. They frequently looked at the eastern tower, wanting to see who the 5 contestants of the Xuesheng family were. The interior of the tower was decorated elegantly and luxuriously. Li Ying, Zhuowen, and the others casually found a place to sit down. Their gazes were uniformly fixed on Li Yinglong, who was sitting on the main seat. Li Yinglong pondered for a moment, then said in a low voice, "This competition is very different from the previous ones. It is no longer purely a martial competition. Instead, it is divided into 2 parts, a literary competition and a martial competition." Apart from Zhuowen, the other 4 people present were all surprised. They clearly did not expect that this competition would have a literary competition. But what followed was a great curiosity. They were all very interested in this newly added literary competition. Family head, is this literary competition decided by the 3 patriarchs? Li Ying suddenly asked. Li Yinglong smiled bitterly and shook his head, saying, "It is not decided by the 3 patriarchs. It was added by Xuesheng, and the literary competition is also decided by Xuesheng. In fact, the other 2 patriarchs and I are not clear about the details of the literary competition. I am just telling you first. You don't have to pay attention to the literary competition for now. Now, let me talk about the martial competition. The martial competition is divided into 2 parts, the group competition and the individual competition. It is still based on the point system, and the ranking is based on the number of points. Li Ying, Li Zi, and the others nodded inwardly. Only Zhuowen revealed a thoughtful expression. From Li Yinglong's tone, it was not difficult to understand that the literary competition was something that had never been done before. Moreover, it was added by Xuesheng. It was very interesting. Next, Li Yinglong explained some details about the martial competition. He asked the 5 contestants to adjust their state of mind in the resting hall of the tower so that they could face the upcoming competition in their best condition. There were more than 10 resting halls in the tower. Each of them was extremely spacious. Zhuowen randomly chose a resting hall and sat down cross-legged. He silently adjusted his aura. His eyes gradually turned scarlet. A faint demonic aura, like an illusory black snake, lingered on the surface of his body. In an instant, Zhuowen's aura became wild and demonic. Whether it was his appearance or aura, no one could associate him with Zhuowen. Time gradually passed, and the originally cold and cheerless arena became lively at a speed visible to the naked eye. An endless stream of people entered the high platform that had been reserved long ago and chatted with their close friends and family. "Haha, Patriarch Li, you are here so early. Are you here early to let the younger generation of the Xuesheng family familiarize themselves with the atmosphere of the arena so that they can reduce the fear in their hearts?" A divine warship flew over and landed beside the western tower. A black-clothed middle-aged man stood at the bow of the divine warship. His hair was black with a tinge of brown, and his eyes were also reddish-brown. His gaze fell on the opposite tower. His eyes seemed to be able to see through the tower and see Li Yinglong inside. He laughed loudly. In the arena, many of the spectators were attracted by this laughter. Their gazes fell on the brown-eyed middle-aged man, and their eyes revealed reverence. "It's the patriarch of the Xuesheng family, Mi Haomiao. I didn't expect him to provoke the Xuesheng family so rudely the moment he arrived. The relationship between the Xuesheng family and the Xuesheng family has never been friendly. The 2 families have always been at odds with each other in every competition. This is no longer a secret." Mi Haomiao's voice formed an invisible sound wave. It was like a 1,000-meter-tall wave that constantly reverberated in the eastern tower. Li Ying, Li Zi, and the others, who were originally adjusting their state of mind, all let out a muffled groan. Their brows were tightly knitted, and their minds became chaotic. Even Zhuowen couldn't help but be affected. His mood became inexplicably irritable. Li Yinglong coldly snorted. There was a trace of anger in his voice, but his sound wave also contained some kind of power that completely eliminated Mi Haomiao's influence. The inexplicable pressure in the tower also instantly vanished. Chapter 4405. Mi Haomiao, don't you find it boring? Using such petty tricks isn't befitting of your status as the patriarch of one of the three great families, Li Yinglong said unkindly. Mi Haomiao stepped into the tower in the west and said with a smile, petty tricks? Patriarch Li, you don't understand my good intentions. The performance of the younger generation of your Void family is barely satisfactory. This can be seen from the past few tournaments. I'm just testing them. If they can't even overcome such a small test, then the younger generation of your Void family will be worse than the previous generation. Giving up as soon as possible might be a wise choice. In the East Tower, Li Ying, Li Zi, Li Shuo, Li Yu, and even Zhuowen walked out of their respective resting halls and arrived at the main hall. In front of the main hall of the tower was a completely transparent light barrier. Through the light barrier, one could overlook the entire arena. Naturally, one could also see Mi Haomiao with his hands behind his back. Zhuowen noticed that Li Yinglong clenched his fists tightly, took a deep breath, and slowly loosened them. Li Ying, Li Zi, and the rest were filled with righteous indignation. This Mi Haomiao was too much. He didn't look like a patriarch at all. Zhuowen looked deeply at Mi Haomiao, who had his hands behind his back and was looking at them with a smile that wasn't a smile. This Mi Haomiao's actions seemed to be petty and calculative. However, it just happened to open the scars of the Void family's poor performance in the previous tournaments. It caused Li Zi, Li Shuo, Li Yu, and the rest, who had just calmed down, to be stirred up again. They fell into negative emotions, and the state they had just adjusted with great difficulty was unknowingly destroyed because of negative emotions. Even Li Ying, who was the calmest among the four, had a gloomy expression. However, Zhuowen could tell from his small movements that Li Ying had also fallen into a terrible mood. This Mi Haomiao wasn't simple. He seemed to not care about trifles, but he was actually very insidious. Don't be affected by Mi Haomiao's words. He's saying it on purpose to disturb you guys. Now, return to the resting hall and adjust your state. As long as you can do well this time, even if you don't want to be first, as long as you can defeat the Void family and obtain second place, this Mi Haomiao won't be so smug anymore. Li Yinglong turned around and ordered in a deep voice. Yes. Li Ying and the others hurriedly bowed, temporarily suppressing the unhappiness in their hearts, and calmly adjusting their state of mind. In the hall of the Western Tower, the black-clothed, brown-eyed Mi Haomiao stood in front of the light barrier with his hands behind his back. His gaze was fixed on the opposite tower as a mocking smile appeared on his face. Behind Mi Haomiao stood 5 young cultivators in an orderly fashion. Among the 5 young cultivators, the one in the lead had black hair and brown eyes. He wore a pure white, tight-fitting short robe and had a valiant bearing. In particular, his eyes were extremely sharp, like a black panther that had been released from its cage to hunt. He was the strongest member of the younger generation of the Void Qi family, ranked 3rd on the Void Yang divine list, the famous Mi Liang. Mi Liang silently looked at the tower opposite him and said proudly, "Father, the younger generation of the Xu Ming aristocratic family is just a bunch of trash. Why do you have to spend so much effort to put on this show? There's no need at all." Mi Haomiao smiled and said, "Mi Liang, even if it's an insignificant stone, at a critical moment, it can cause an undetectable obstacle. When this small obstacle appears in front of you at the most critical moment, no matter how strong you are, you might be delayed and fail. This is the last straw that breaks the camel's back. Never overlook those insignificant things. Furthermore, your target this time is the virtual corona of the Xulong family. The Xulong family is nothing to be afraid of. If you can lighten the burden ahead of time, allowing you to face the virtual corona in your best condition, why not?" Mi Liang's eyes revealed a look of deep thought. He bowed deeply to Emi Haomiao and said, "Father's teachings are right. This child was too shallow." Emi Haomiao placed his hands behind his back and said without turning his head, "It's fine. Now, all of you can return to the resting hall and adjust your states. We cannot afford to lose this large competition." Yes. More and more people gathered on the arena's high platform. Many of them were people from the various large forces in Void-Yang Divine City. They had specially come to watch the large competition between the three great families. Among them, there were also many people from the large forces of other cities in the Void-Yang realm. After all, the three great families were the three strongest forces in the Void-Yang realm, second only to the King of Hell. Their large competition between the younger generation was very beneficial to many of the younger cultivators. When a divine ship soared through the sky and finally stopped at the edge of the high platform in the south, the entire arena fell into silence. Everyone's gazes landed on the high platform in the south. Even Li Yinglong and Emi Haomiao, who were in the hall on the east and west side of the high platform, couldn't help but cast their gazes on the divine ship on the high platform in the south. In the end, their gazes landed on a figure standing at the head of the deck. The moment they saw this figure, Li Yinglong and Emi Haomiao's expressions became extremely grave. This was a bald, middle-aged man. His face seemed to be completely devoid of blood. It was as pale as paper, and there was no expression on his face. If it weren't for his sharp eyes that emitted an indescribable light, it would be easy for others to mistake him for a stiff corpse. Sensing the gazes of Li Yinglong and Emi Haomiao, the bald man slowly turned his head and looked at the east and west towers respectively. The corners of his mouth twitched, but no one knew what he was saying. Xu Jianying's aura has become much more mellow. I'm afraid he's not far from the peak of the early stage of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. How did he cultivate? Why is his progress so fast? Li Yinglong frowned slightly and muttered in his heart. This guy is still like a corpse. He doesn't have any expression at all. Moreover, he has become stronger again. How frustrating. Emi Haomiao rubbed his temples and muttered to himself. This bald man with a face as pale as a corpse was the head of the Xulong family, Xu Jianying. Behind Xu Jianying stood 5 young cultivators silently. Among the 5, Xu Ju was among them. Xu Ju, who was originally as calm as a pearl of wisdom, was now much more low-key. The arrogance in his eyes was also much more restrained. Intentionally or otherwise, he glanced at the back of the youth standing at the front. The depths of his eyes were filled with complex emotions. There was respect, jealousy, and even some kind of twisted madness. The young man that Xu Ju was staring at with a complicated expression stood at the front, just 2 steps behind Xu Jianying. His appearance was far less handsome than Xu Ju. His entire face was somewhat round. His complexion was about the same as Xu Jianying's, and he looked sickly. However, there was an unfathomable indifference in his eyes. It was as if everything was under his control and nothing could enter his eyes. He was Xu Mianyang, the strongest member of the Xulong family's younger generation. On the Void-Yama god list, he was a peerless genius who suppressed Emi Liang by a head, ranking second on the Void-Yama god list. Chapter 4406. Xu Jianying raised his head slightly, his somewhat soulless eyes landing on the northern tower. His soulless eyes shone with a certain light. The 5 of you, enter the lounge first. The competition this time will not be hosted by our Xulong family, but by the King of Hell's people. Xu Jianying tilted his head slightly and spoke indifferently to the 5 behind him. Xu Ju frowned, rather puzzled. The previous competitions of the 3 great clans had always been jointly hosted by the 3 great clans. The King of Hell had never interfered. After all, the share of the divine void spring was the wager of the 3 great clans. It had nothing to do with the King of Hell. This time, the King of Hell had suddenly interfered and changed a portion of the competition's rules without permission. Xu Ju was very confused. He didn't know what the King of Hell was up to. But he also knew that as the true ruler of the Void-Yama realm, the King of Hell had absolute authority. Their Xulong family had been developing very rapidly recently, faintly suppressing the other 2 great clans. They were in the limelight, But they didn't dare to go head-to-head with a colossus like the King of Hell. They could only obediently follow his orders. After the Shulong family's team entered the southern tower, the arena was already a boiling cauldron of voices. Everyone was eagerly anticipating the start of the competition. But they also knew that they still needed to wait for another team, and that was the team representing the King of Hell. Sure enough, it didn't take long for a golden warship to appear above Floating City. It finally landed on the northern platform of the gladiator arena. The golden divine ship was clearly much more powerful than the divine ships of the three great clans. It also had the elegance and nobility of royalty. It was otherworldly. A single figure stood on the spacious deck. His hair was white, and he wore a luxurious robe interwoven with red and gold. He was very tall, at least 2 meters tall, and looked like a small giant. But his expression was amiable, and his face was benevolent. It was a stark contrast to his enormous body. One of the King of Hell's 3 sovereigns, Gold Sovereign, when they saw this tall man who was like a little giant, many of the cultivators in the arena sucked in a breath of cold air. Their eyes revealed a faint look of reverence. When Jin Yuanjun arrived at the arena, the family heads of the 3 great families led their contestants out of the tower and bowed in Jin Yuanjuan's direction. With Li Shuo's explanation, Zhuoan also understood that the Gold Lord held a high position in the King of Hell. The King of Hell's highest authority was made up of 1 king and 3 sovereigns. 1 king was the virtual King of Hell, and the 3 sovereigns were the Dark God Lord, the Thunder God Lord, and the Gold God Lord. If the 3 sovereigns were separated, their power and status would not be as high as the King of Hell. However, if the 3 sovereigns were together, even the King of Hell would have to be wary of them. This showed how high the 3 sovereigns' status was in the King of Hell. The Gold Lord smiled and waved his hand, indicating that there was no need for formalities. He smiled and said, "I am honored to be the host of this year's competition between the 3 clans. Here, I would like to thank the family heads of the 3 great families for your generosity. You have allowed the King of Hell to make such a presumptuous request. If there's anything incomplete, I hope the 3 clan heads will forgive me." Mai Haomiao quickly waved his hand and said, "You are too kind, Gold Lord. It is our honor to be able to contribute to the King of Hell." Li Yinglong and Xu Jieying also said that they did not dare. The corners of Jinyao Lord's mouth curled up slightly and he continued, "Family heads, according to the agreement between you and the king, the martial arts portion of the competition will be decided by the 3 families. However, the martial arts portion will be arranged by us. As for the martial arts and martial arts battles, the 3 of you will decide. The King of Hell has never forced anyone to do something against their will." The 3 family heads looked at each other. Without any discussion, they said in unison, "Naturally, the martial arts battle will begin." The Gold Lord's smile grew wider. He no longer pretended to be modest and said hypocritically, "Since the 3 family heads have said so, it would be impolite of me to decline." With that, the Gold Lord jumped down from the high tower in the north. His entire body emitted a sharp and dazzling golden light as he landed in the middle of the arena. When everyone's eyes involuntarily fell on Gold Lord, the latter unhurriedly took out a stone slab from his sleeve. This stone slab was irregular and square in shape. It was about 1 foot long and wide. There were many strange scratches on the surface of the stone slab, as if it had been made by many different sharp weapons. However, although these scratches were strange and irregular, they covered the surface of the stone slab and gave people an unfathomable feeling of harmony. It was as if the scratches on the stone slab were combined to form some kind of inseparable pattern. Zhuowen's eyes fell on the stone slab in the Gold Lord's hand. In an instant, he found that the strange scratches on the surface of the stone slab were wriggling and twisting, forming some kind of pattern in the center of the stone slab. When Zhuowen wanted to take a closer look at the pattern formed by the many scratches, his vision suddenly turned black, causing him to involuntarily shift his gaze. When he looked back at the stone slab, he found that the scratches on the surface of the stone slab were still scattered everywhere. They had not gathered together to form some kind of pattern. Was that an illusion? Or is there some kind of power in this stone slab that is interfering with me? Zhuowen frowned. There was a hint of fear and caution in his eyes. The stone slab that the Gold Lord had taken out was not simple. "This is a fragment of the primordial slate." Li Yinglong, who was standing in front of Zhuowen, could no longer remain calm when he saw the stone slab in the Gold Lord's hand. His body trembled and he could not help but mumble to himself. Li Ying, Li Zi, and the other three were also shocked. It was as if they had been stunned by some kind of miracle. On the other side, the people from the Xulong and Xuli families were also very expressive. "A fragment of the primordial slate?" Zhuowen revealed a puzzled expression. This was the first time he had heard of the so-called primordial slate. However, from the word primordial, it was very likely that the so-called primordial slate was related to the primordial star system. He had wanted to secretly ask Li Shuo about the primordial slate. However, Li Shuo's attention was completely attracted by the fragment in the Gold Lord's hand. Therefore, he dismissed the idea. His gaze fell on the Gold Lord in the center of the arena. He knew that the latter had taken out the fragment of the primordial slate. Naturally, there would be a certain explanation. "Gold Lord, you intend to use this fragment of the primordial slate as the content of the Wen battle?" Xu Jiang's pale face showed a hint of contemplation. He regained his composure and asked in a low voice. "Yes. This is also the king's decision. There is an abandoned space within the primordial slate. Although it is called a space, it is more like an abandoned maze. This maze is mysterious and strange. It is as if there is no solution. Even the great king has not solved all the levels of the maze. I want to use this as the content of the Wen battle. You won't object, right?" The Gold Lord smiled faintly. The three family patriarchs looked at each other. Since the Gold Lord had said so, how could they object? However, they were full of doubts. The primordial slate was the highest taboo in the imperial court. It was kept in the most secretive place in the imperial court. Why would Xu Yama use it as part of the Wen battle? Could there be a deeper meaning? Chapter 4407. There are 18 levels in the labyrinth of the primordial slate fragment. Each level is more difficult than the last. If you can't solve all the levels, you'll be trapped in the labyrinth forever, never to leave. The Gold Glorious Lord spoke again. However, his words made the people of the three aristocratic families change their expressions. "Gold Lord, according to what you said, if the contestants enter the labyrinth and can't solve all 18 levels, they'll never be able to leave," Xu Jiang said gloomily. Gold Lord smirked and said, "That was in the past. Although the great king couldn't solve all the levels, he forcefully broke through the confinement of the labyrinth and walked out. Of course, the great king spent a lot of effort to do that. He also set up many teleportation formations in the labyrinth. If you can't solve it, you'll have to give up immediately and leave through the teleportation formation nearby." The three aristocratic families heaved a sigh of relief. If they couldn't solve the labyrinth and leave, they wouldn't let their young geniuses enter the labyrinth, even if they had to offend the King of Hell. At the same time, they were extremely wary of the primordial slate fragment. This was only a fragment of the primordial slate fragment, and the labyrinth inside it had stumped a terrifying expert like King of Hell. If it was the complete version of the primordial slate fragment, it would be even more terrifying. The rules of the Wen battle this time are very simple. The participants will have 3 days and 3 nights. Within these 3 days, they will enter the maze to solve the checkpoint. The results will be ranked according to the number of levels. If anyone can pass the 10th level or above, they will receive an additional reward from the Void Hell King's court. If anyone can pass the 15th level or above, the Great King will personally summon them and reward them. Furthermore, they can make any request that is allowed by the Great King. Gold Lord said calmly. Hearing this, the three aristocratic families couldn't stay calm anymore. As the ruler of the Void-Yama realm, King of Hell had absolute authority in the entire Void-Yama realm. He also had the most resources and power in the realm. If he could obtain a promise from such a supreme expert, it would be more valuable than any treasure. The smile on Jinyao Lord's face grew wider when he saw that the juniors of the three aristocratic families were ready to make a move. It seemed like his words were very effective. This Wen battle is an opportunity for our Shueshuang family. If you can perform well in the Wen battle, our Shueshuang family might be able to hold our heads up high in the competition. After hearing Gold Lord's explanation, Li Yinglong's face lit up. He encouraged Li Ying and the others. Their Void Realm aristocratic family was at a disadvantage when it came to fighting. The addition of the Wen duel was actually a good thing for them. After all, Wen duel had nothing to do with one's cultivation. All three parties had the same starting point. Li Ying and the others acknowledged in a low voice. Zhuowen, who was at the back of the group, felt a scrutinizing gaze and couldn't help but raise his head to look. He discovered that the owner of the scrutinizing gaze was Xu Ju from the Xulong family's group. Zhuowen's expression was calm. He glanced at Xu Ju and then casually looked away as if he didn't know the latter at all. Xu Ju silently glanced at Zhuowen and frowned. Virtual Corona, who was standing in front of Xu Ju, noticed Xu Ju's strange expression and asked in surprise, "Brother Ju, what's wrong? Why do you look so serious?" Xu Ju smiled and said, "I'm just curious about the foreign aid in the Void Realm aristocratic families group. I heard that this person is the new 10th genius on the Void Realm aristocratic families list. Recently, his name has been the talk of the town." Virtual Corona glanced at Zhuowen in the Void Realm aristocratic families group and said indifferently, "I've heard of him. If he can defeat Go Yi, it means that his strength is not bad. But it's just not bad. Although there's an extra Wen duel this time, the Void Realm aristocratic family is too weak. There's nothing to be afraid of. You should know the Patriarch's goal this time, right? We want to get the remaining share of the Divine Void Spring in the Void Realm aristocratic family's hands." Xu Ju nodded and carefully looked at Zhuowen. In the end, he secretly shook his head and said, "It seems that I'm overthinking things. This person isn't Zhuowen in disguise." Xu Ju knew very well that a person's appearance could be disguised and their aura could be concealed, but the cultivation method they cultivated couldn't change so much in such a short period of time. The foreign aid that the Void Realm aristocratic family had invited, Zhuanyanxue, cultivated a cultivation method that was completely demonic. Even his aura was shrouded in demonic energy, and his appearance was completely different. He wasn't Zhuowen. There's also the Wen duel that accumulates points. In other words, each person will get 10 points for each stage. You three aristocratic families have 5 people. In theory, if all 5 of you can pass 18 stages, each person will get 180 points, and the total points will be 900. Of course, this is just an ideal assumption. The points accumulated in the Wen duel will be used in the Wen duel. I'm not in charge of the Wen duel. The 3 of you can decide for yourselves. Jinyao Lord's sharp eyes swept across the 3 patriarchs before him and continued, "I'll now open the entrance to the primordial slate fragment. When the time comes, let your juniors enter." After receiving the agreement of the 3 patriarchs, Jinyao Lord began to sit cross-legged on the ground. The primordial slate fragment emitted a resplendent spiritual aura as it floated in front of Jinyao Lord. Jinyao Lord's hands quickly formed a seal, and the spiritual aura around the primordial slate fragment became denser. Rays of spiritual aura shot out from his body like specks of starlight, lingering around the primordial slate fragment and rapidly revolving around it. The numerous scratches on the surface of the primordial slate fragment crazily wriggled toward the center. The dense scratches constantly mixed together, finally forming a maze-like pattern. Participants of the grand competition, extend your fingers and touch the spiritual aura on the surface of the primordial slate fragment. One by one, who will go first? Jinyao Lord's eyes were solemn as he looked at the juniors behind the 3 patriarchs and ordered in a deep voice. "I'll go first." Virtual Corona's pale face was still expressionless. He spoke slowly, took a step forward, and appeared in front of the primordial slate fragment as if he had teleported. He extended his pale, lifeless arm and landed on the surface of the primordial slate fragment. In an instant, Virtual Corona felt a powerful suction force coming from the primordial slate fragment. Then, he only saw darkness before his eyes. From the outside world's point of view, Virtual Corona's entire body was distorted the moment he touched the spiritual aura on the surface of the primordial slate fragment. To be more precise, the space around Virtual Corona was distorted. The distorted space was like a vortex that poured into the primordial slate fragment, bringing Virtual Corona's entire body into it. Chapter 4408. After the Virtual Corona entered, the other 4 members of the Shulong family followed closely behind, followed by the Shulong family's team. The Shulong family's team was the last to enter, and Zhuowen was the last person. When he reached out his right hand and touched the spiritual light on the surface of the immemorial stone slab, he keenly noticed that the immemorial stone slab seemed to tremble and moved away from him without leaving a trace. Then, Zhuowen heard the Gold Lord, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, let out a muffled groan. The primordial slate fragment, which was trying to get away from Zhuowen, immediately stopped in its tracks. Zhuowen took advantage of this opportunity and quickly placed his right hand on the spiritual light. The space around him immediately distorted, and he was completely pulled into an unknown space by a powerful suction force. When Zhuowen disappeared in front of the immemorial stone slab, the Gold Lord slowly opened his eyes and frowned. In that instant, he noticed that the immemorial stone slab showed signs of losing control and was about to escape his control. After all, the immemorial stone slab had been restricted by the Void King, and there were even more restrictions placed on it. It was basically impossible for it to lose control. But what was the immemorial stone slab's strange movement just now? The Gold Lord could not figure it out. He did not even think about the young demonic cultivator who entered the immemorial stone slab space last. In his eyes, that young demonic cultivator was too weak, and the immemorial stone slab had a great origin. How could a mere ant be able to affect the primordial slate? The Gold Lord stood up and waved his sleeve. The spiritual light of the immemorial stone slab floating in front of him suddenly blazed. It shot out of his body and into the void, forming a huge virtual map of a maze. This maze was extremely complicated. Not only were there countless openings, but there were also many circuits. Once someone was trapped in a circuit, they would constantly be in place. No matter how much time they spent, they would not be able to walk out of the circuit, unless they realized that they were in a circuit of the maze. Furthermore, the maze was divided into 18 regions. The deeper one went into the region, the more complicated and bizarre the map of the maze became. Many of the cultivators in the arena felt dizzy the moment they saw the map of the maze. It was simply too complicated, let alone trying to solve the maze themselves. There were 15 golden light spots in the map. However, these 15 light spots were not in the same place. Instead, they were scattered all over the first area of the labyrinth. Because the golden light spots were exactly the same, it was impossible to tell which light spot represented who. Now, let's see how they perform, Gold Lord said calmly. When Zhuowen opened his eyes again, he realized that he was no longer in the arena. What appeared in front of him were towering walls that seemed to have no end. The surface of the barrier was mottled, as if it had experienced the baptism of time. It was filled with an ancient feeling. On both sides of Zhuowen were these kinds of ancient barriers. They stretched forward as if there was no end. At the same time, Zhuowen also noticed that there were irregular scratches on the surface of the barrier. These scratches were surprisingly similar to the scratches on the surface of the primordial stone slab. Zhuowen stood where he was, his brows furrowed. Just now, when he had touched the primordial stone slab, his sea of consciousness had suddenly hurt. The 2 primordial stones in his divine soul had also reacted strangely. What surprised him even more was that he could feel that the primordial stone slab seemed to be afraid of the primordial stone and had avoided him. If Gold Lord had not controlled the primordial stone slab in time, it was very likely that the primordial stone slab would have escaped. It seems that Gold Lord was right. The primordial stone slab is indeed something from the immemorial star. Otherwise, it would not have reacted so strongly to the primordial stone, Zhuowen muttered to himself. Until now, Zhuowen was not very clear about the origin of the primordial stone. However, He knew that this stone was definitely inextricably linked to the primordial tree and the immemorial star. In particular, even Ma Yujie was collecting primordial stones. Furthermore, he had heard from Ma Yujie that this fellow wanted to use a complete primordial stone to enter the immemorial star. I wonder where this damn fatty is now. Zhuowen missed Ma Yujie. This fellow was his lucky star. Every time he appeared, Zhuowen would always have a bountiful harvest that exceeded his expectations. Hey! Zhuowen thought as he placed his right hand on the barrier beside him. He planned to walk along the barrier. This was the most common way to walk in a maze. Although it was very time-consuming, at least he would not be trapped in it forever. He would be able to walk out of the maze after many attempts. However, when Zhuowen's right hand landed on the barrier, he realized that there were strange ripples at the place where his right hand touched the barrier. His right hand passed through it directly. It was as if his right hand had landed on a soft water curtain instead of a hard barrier. Zhuowen waved his right hand and realized that the hard barrier in front of him was like air. It was as if it did not exist in front of him. What's going on? Zhuowen was puzzled. He retracted his right hand and stretched it out again. He realized that he still did not encounter any obstacles. He stopped in place and thought for a while. Then, he took a step forward and walked toward the barrier without stopping. When he successfully passed through the barrier, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with disbelief. Were the maze barriers in the primordial stone slab made of paper? Or could it be that the barrier was just an illusion, and everything was illusory? Zhuowen thought as he passed through layers of barriers and headed toward the center of the maze. In the end, Zhuowen arrived at the exit of the first checkpoint without any obstacles. This was a mottled stone door that was dozens of feet tall. Below the stone door was a small door. The small door was wide open, and there was an evil stone statue there, blocking the small door that was wide open. Just as Zhuowen's gaze landed on the stone sculpture, he heard the clear sound of footsteps. Then, a slender figure slowly walked out from the maze passageway to the left of the stone door. It was a young man whose face was as pale as a corpse. There was a faint smile on his face. However, when he saw Zhuowen, who had arrived before him, the indifferent expression on his face completely stiffened. Virtual Corona. Zhuowen looked at the pale young man in front of him and became serious. He could not help but sigh in his heart. Virtual Corona was indeed the genius ranked second on the Void Yama god list. She could actually walk out of the first checkpoint of the maze so quickly. He glanced at Virtual Corona's right hand, which was placed on the barrier, and suddenly understood. It seemed that the maze barrier was not an illusion, but a real existence. And this situation only happened to him alone. Is it because of the primordial stone? Zhuowen thought about it and finally blamed all the problems on the primordial stone. This was the only explanation that made sense. Virtual Corona regained her indifferent expression. She glanced at Zhuowen and said coldly, "It seems that you're not as simple as you seem." Zhuowen shrugged and said, "My luck is pretty good. I was just walking around randomly and happened to walk here." Virtual Corona did not answer and ignored Zhuowen. Instead, she carefully looked at the huge stone door in front of her and the evil stone statue in front of the small open door below the stone door. Chapter 4409. The appearance of this stone sculpture was very strange. It was a strange humanoid figure with 4 limbs, a head, and a body, but it had no specific face. This was because whenever one looked at the face of this stone sculpture, one would find that the face of this stone sculpture was constantly changing, as if one was looking at this face through a kaleidoscope. "You, move this stone sculpture." The Virtual Corona withdrew his gaze, turned his head, looked at Zhuowen, and said arrogantly and indifferently to Zhuowen, Zhuowen frowned slightly. He didn't expect that the Virtual Corona would suddenly ask him to move the evil stone sculpture. Because the stone sculpture happened to occupy all the space of the small door, in order to pass through this stone door, one must move the stone sculpture and then leave through the small door. But this stone sculpture was too evil. At first glance, there was something wrong with it. "Go, move it." The Virtual Corona emphasized again in a commanding tone. He was very dissatisfied with Zhuowen's disobedience. A mere ant in the late stage of the Chenkuan Great Tribulation had no right to refuse his order. "You are not qualified to order me," Zhuowen said indifferently. The virtual Corona frowned slightly. He looked coldly at Zhuowen and said, "Do you know the consequences of disobeying me?" The corners of Zhuowen's mouth curled into a mocking smile, and said, "You are not even at the level of the ancient Star Emperor, and yet you are so arrogant. You don't even have the slightest self-awareness. I really feel sorry for you." The virtual Corona's expressionless face showed a trace of anger. He looked coldly at Zhuowen and said, "How ridiculous. If a powerhouse at the level of the ancient Star Emperor said this to me, I might be more convinced. But you are just an ant in the Chenkuan Great Tribulation. What right do you have to say this to me?" The virtual Corona said. With a wave of his sleeve, a pale energy surged like a tide. The surging tide of pale white energy manifested many pale arms that looked like corpses. They continuously grabbed at Zhuowen, as if they wanted to tear him to pieces. Zhuowen's expression was solemn. This virtual Corona could be ranked second on the virtual Yama divine list. He was indeed not a simple character. Just this move alone showed that the virtual Corona's strength was far beyond most of the cosmic Dharma powerhouses. Even some early ancient Star Emperor cultivators might not be stronger than this virtual Corona. Zhuowen's eyes became incomparably scarlet red. Black fog, as thick as ink, surged out of his body, quickly entangled and squirming, turning into a pitch-black wall in front of him. At the same time, even more black fog flew out like countless flying insects, completely enveloping the surroundings, causing it to fall into darkness. When the black fog completely dissipated, the virtual Corona found that Zhuowen had disappeared without a trace. He's gone. The virtual Corona looked at the gradually dissipating black fog and found that Zhuowen was no longer in sight. He was a little surprised. Moreover, there was a strange power in this maze that blocked his divine sense. Therefore, he could not use his divine sense at all. He could only watch as Zhuowen suddenly disappeared here. On the other side of the stone door, Zhuowen walked out of the wall that was full of scratches. The moment he fought with the virtual Corona, he used the primordial stone to suppress the primordial stone slab and directly passed through the second level on the other side of the stone door. The virtual Corona's strength was not weak. Even Zhuowen would not be able to get rid of him without using various trump cards. In this grand competition, he did not want to expose himself. Therefore, he left immediately and temporarily avoided the virtual Corona. Zhuowen followed the wall on the other side of the stone door and came to the stone door. When he saw the scene on the other side of the stone door, he could not help but gasp. There were bloody human heads hanging on the back of the stone door. There were male and female heads, old and young. What was even more strange was that there was a long esophagus dripping with blood hanging below these heads. Near the esophagus near the neck, the trachea was exposed. The human heads were neatly arranged on the back, from top to bottom, from left to right. They just happened to fill the back of the stone door. How did this little guy get to the back? Since that old guy forced the stone door open last time, it seems that no one has opened the stone door. The head of a 5-year-old child in the middle of the stone door suddenly opened his eyes. His lips opened and closed, but the voice that came out was old and hoarse. It sounded quite harsh. His young eyebrows frowned slightly, and he looked at Zhuowen, who was standing in front of the wall behind the stone door in confusion. He did not seem to understand how this person came in. How did this guy come in? He didn't even pass the level. The old man with wrinkled skin said to himself in confusion. Maybe he saw that I'm pretty and deliberately came in to pursue me. I'm so touched. A fat woman with a thick layer of makeup pretended to be shy. I want to kill someone. Can we kill this guy? Let's kill him and stew him. A ferocious head with a scar on his face said fiercely. Zhuowen looked at the many heads on the other side of the stone door, and the topic of discussion was all about him. In an instant, the horrifying scene just now was completely washed away by the conversation of these supreme-grade skulls. Can I ask you a question? Zhuowen suddenly asked. Immediately, the many heads that were originally arguing all stopped. Then, pairs of red eyes stared at Zhuowen in unison. What's the question? The head in the middle of the stone door coughed and asked. Are you the first test? Zhuowen asked strangely. As you can see, we are the great thousand faces divine wall. We have unparalleled power, unpredictable and omnipotent, the head said proudly. Zhuowen looked carefully and did not see any powerful ability in this so-called thousand faces divine wall. These heads were completely bound in the dark of the stone door, as if they could not get rid of it. If that's the case, why don't you come and bite me together? Zhuowen asked jokingly. All of a sudden, all of the heads turned gloomy. They looked left and right, all of them looking at the head of the child in the middle. Boss, he seems to be provoking us. Can you bear it? Kill him. The ferocious head instigated angrily. Get lost. Don't you know the rules here? Only when someone breaks through the level can we be free from the shackles and temporarily regain our original combat strength. Now, how do you want me to kill him? With my head. The head of the child flew into a rage. In an instant, many heads on the stone door hung their heads dejectedly, like withered grass. Zhuowen looked at these dejected heads with a strange look. He found that these heads were really good. They did not have much ability, but they were very good at talking. Creak, creak. Suddenly, a strange sound came from the front of the stone door. At the small door under the stone door, the evil stone statue that was originally blocking was moved by some kind of force and moved outside. On the other side of the stone door, many heads were hungry and excited, their eyes shining. Chapter 44:10. When the stone sculptures were completely moved out, these heads suddenly stretched out and gathered around the small door. Their evil scarlet eyes stared strangely at the creatures outside the small door, ready to come in at any time. Zhuowen looked over and saw a figure appear at the small door. He bent down and planned to enter through the small door. It was a face as pale as a corpse's. As soon as he poked his head in, he immediately noticed that something was wrong. He gently raised his head and saw pairs of strange red eyes and twisted ferocious heads. He couldn't help but gasp. Boom. But he quickly calmed down. With a cold snort, he waved his sleeves, and pale energy surged out. Once again, strange pale arms appeared and grabbed at these strange heads. These heads were not in a hurry. They opened their mouths and spat out a large pool of acidic and corrosive venom, completely corroding the pale arms formed by the pale energy. At the same time, more corrosive liquid turned into a long stream and rushed toward the virtual corona in the small door. Virtual Corona's expression changed slightly. Obviously, she didn't expect these strange heads to be so strong. Moreover, the small door was too narrow and unsuitable for combat. She had to retreat first. Zhuowen silently watched the battle just now. It seemed that this was the first test. These strange heads were really sinister. The small door was deliberately left open so that they could launch a surprise attack when others entered the small door. Just now, if Virtual Corona's strength wasn't enough and her reaction wasn't fast enough, she might have been seriously injured by that surprise attack. Here. Have you seen our strength? Anyone who dares to barge into this place will have to go through us. The toddler's head smugly looked at Zhuowen behind it and laughed. But I broke in, and it seems that you can't do anything to me. The corner of Zhuowen's mouth curled up slightly and he teased. The expression of the head of the toddler froze. He looked at Zhuowen angrily and quickly rushed out. However, as soon as he left the stone door, he was restrained by a mysterious force and involuntarily dragged back. If it weren't for the rules and restrictions here, you would have died thousands of times. The toddler's head coldly snorted. Zhuowen's eyes flickered, and he suddenly changed the topic. Can you tell me about the origins of this primeval slate? Also, what is hidden in the depths of this maze? The toddler's head sneered. Who the hell are you? Why should I tell you? What if I say that I can help you escape? Can you tell me? Zhuowen asked with a smile. The toddler's head, which didn't care at first, suddenly became serious. He looked deeply at Zhuowen and laughed. His laughter was full of mockery. You! The child's head shook its head repeatedly. On the other hand, Zhuowen remained calm. When he noticed that the primordial stone slab was being suppressed by the primordial grandmist stone, he knew that the primordial stone slab was definitely a treasure of a lower grade than the primordial grandmist stone. If he was good at using the power of the primordial stone, Zhuowen might really be able to help this young child's head escape. Of course, the premise of all this was that he had to know the origin of the primordial stone slab. Zhuowen didn't say anything. He slowly walked to the maze's barrier at the back. Even when his back was close to the barrier, he didn't stop and directly passed through it. The toddler's head and the other heads, who were still laughing at Zhuowen, looked as if they had seen a ghost. They watched Zhuowen disappear in front of them just like that. In an instant, they immediately understood. How did this person suddenly appear behind the stone door? But how did he do it? There was some kind of mysterious power in the primordial stone slab that had a terrifying restriction on any creature that entered the maze. As the guardians of the checkpoints, the restriction was even greater. However, this guy in front of them could actually freely pass through the maze's barrier. In other words, the mysterious power in the primordial stone slab didn't have any restrictions on him. Then, where did this guy come from? When the toddler's head was deep in thought, the virtual corona tried to rush through the small door again. This time, he was prepared and his speed was extremely fast. He took advantage of the gap between these heads' contemplation and entered the back of the stone door without any hindrance. The virtual corona turned around and leaned against the barrier. Looking at the many heads on the back of the stone door, his eyes narrowed slightly. However, he didn't show any fear. Instead, he showed a look of realization. So, it's all you're doing. You still want to trick me? A trace of hostility flashed in the virtual corona's eyes. He stretched out his right palm and grasped the void. A pale energy shot out from his palm, forming some kind of extremely terrifying energy cannonball that blasted the back of the stone door. What surprised the virtual corona was that the heads on the back of the stone door didn't panic. They even sneered mockingly. When the energy cannonball formed by the virtual corona's divine power approached the stone door, an inexplicable force suddenly surged and annihilated the energy cannonball. Cold sweat broke out on the virtual corona's forehead, and his whole body trembled. This inexplicable force was so terrifying that he couldn't breathe under the pressure. The maze has its own rules. Not only do we guardians have to abide by them, but you outsiders also have to abide by them. Since you've passed the first level, get out of here. If you still want to attack us, your soul will be destroyed. In the middle of the stone door, the toddler's head sneered. When the virtual corona planned to attack them, he wasn't worried at all because the maze's rules had always been strict and sacred. However, as soon as the toddler's head finished speaking, he remembered the young man who ignored the maze's rules just now. His gaze became very strange. The virtual corona took a deep breath, looked up at the grey sky, and then left the stone door without saying a word. He continued to advance to the second level. Not long after the virtual corona left, Zhuowen shuttled out from the side of the barrier. He looked at the toddler's head and pretended to be confident. Now, do you still think I can't help you get out of here? The toddler's head looked at Zhuowen and fell into deep thought. He gritted his teeth and said, "Help us get out of here first, and then I'll tell you everything I know about the primordial slate." Zhuowen shook his head and said, "You have to tell me first. Otherwise, I won't help you." The toddler's head's eyes were full of struggle. Finally, he said in a deep voice, "Actually, you don't know how to get us out of here, right? Because the only way to get out of here is too difficult. Even if you ignore the rules here, it's still difficult to do it." Zhuowen's face stiffened, and he fell silent. The toddler's head was very shrewd. He could tell that Zhuowen was bluffing from the beginning. "However, I can tell you everything I know, and you have to try to get us out of here. If even you fail, I don't think anyone will succeed." The toddler's head seemed to have made up his mind. He gritted his teeth and said to Zhuowen with a firm look in his eyes. Chapter 44:11. If it's within my ability, I'll do my best. Zhuowen cupped his fists and said. The child's head sighed softly, his eyes filled with sorrow as he said in a low voice, "Do you know what the primordial slate is?" Zhuowen rolled his eyes. If he knew, Would he still need to ask you? The child's head seemed to not see Zhuowen's expression as he continued. The primordial slate is just an intellectual toy in the hands of the primordial gods for fun. In the space of the complete version of the primordial slate, there are a total of 100 levels in the labyrinth. Each level has a corresponding guardian who is trapped in the corresponding level endlessly, becoming the playthings of the primordial god. I came from the Thousand Faces clan of the primordial chaos void. Within the clan, I was considered a top expert. However, the primordial gods took a fancy to my special ability and forcefully captured me. Furthermore, they trapped my soul at the exit of this level forever. I became a part of their entertainment. The guardian of the second level is a demonic cultivator of your human race. His soul was transformed by the primordial gods and he became a madman who only knows how to kill. Now, he's even worse than a wild beast. He's much more miserable than me. There's also the third level, the fourth level. The child's head slowly narrated. His tone was calm, but Zhuowen could hear the sorrow and anger in his words. Zhuowen's eyes revealed a dignified expression. This was the first time he had heard of the primordial gods from someone else. The primordial gods were located high up in the primordial star system. They existed since ancient times and were eternal. Zhuowen had only heard of their legends before, but he did not know many details about the primordial gods. Now, through the child's head's narration, he began to gradually understand these so-called primordial gods. They were high up in the air, eternal and immortal. However, they regarded all living beings below the primordial star system as ants and held the power to kill them. Many primordial gods, for the sake of entertainment, would play with the lives of the living beings they regarded as lowly. Such a fact was cruel and bloody. The guardians of each level in the primordial slates were once famous peak experts in the chaos void. Among them, there were also the supreme experts of the human clan from the ancient times in the 100 territories. However, these supreme experts, who would be able to look down on the heroes of any place in the void of chaos, were merely toys in front of the primeval gods that could be manipulated at will. How do you know so much about it? You are not an immemorial god from the immemorial star system, Zhuowen asked in a deep voice. The toddler's head smiled and said, I've been trapped here for countless years. Before I fell from the ancient star system to the 100 territories, the ancient slate was used by many ancient gods. When they were having fun, they would naturally chat with their friends. From their words, I also learned a lot about the ancient star system. I've also heard rumors about the primordial Hongmeng tree. Do you want to know the truth about the primordial Hongmeng tree? Zhuowen raised his eyebrows slightly and immediately became interested. The primordial Hongmeng tree bore countless starry sky fruits and each starry sky fruit represented a starry sky. Zhuowen was born in one of the starry sky fruits of the primordial Hongmeng tree. I don't know the origin of the primordial Hongmeng tree. However, I know that the starry sky fruits of the primordial Hongmeng tree are the food of the ancient god. Many of the ripe starry sky fruits of the primordial Hongmeng tree will be picked by the servants of the ancient gods. Every time the ancient gods gather for a meal or hold a ceremony, the starry sky fruits that are picked will be shared by them. Haha, how ironic. We have cultivated for countless years, but in the end, we are only their livestock and food. The toddler's head laughed hysterically. However, Zhuowen could hear the sadness and unwillingness in his laughter. Zhuowen was completely shocked. The starry sky fruits of the primordial Hongmeng tree were only the food of the ancient gods and the many powerful races in the chaotic void were only the playthings of the ancient gods. This was simply too crazy. I came out from one of the starry sky fruits of the primordial Hongmeng tree. If this is really the case, Zhuowen was still unable to accept the so-called truth that the toddler's head had said. It was too shocking. The primordial Hongmeng tree bears so many starry sky fruits and even if they are picked, new starry sky fruits will grow again. In such a large number of starry sky fruits, there will always be a portion of the starry sky fruits that are lucky. They will go through a complete cycle from birth to decay. And you are lucky. The starry sky fruit that you were born from is also lucky. The toddler's head sighed softly. Zhuowen fell silent. The truth that the toddler's head had said was too heavy and dark for him. However, he quickly calmed down. The ancient gods were too far away for him. The only thing he could do now was to be down to earth and constantly improve himself. Only in this way would he have the ability to protect himself and those close to him if something ominous happened in the future. How did the primordial slate fall into the 100 territories? Zhuowen asked in a deep voice. The only thing he was curious about was how the primordial slate fell into the 100 territories, since it was something from the primordial star system. This is related to the fall of an ancient god. What happened back then? I'm not too sure. I only remember that an ancient god fell from the primordial star system into the chaotic void and finally arrived in the 100 territories. As for the primordial slate, it fell with the primordial god. In the process of falling, it shattered into pieces. The piece I'm on is just an incomplete fragment of the primordial slate. The toddler's head said. A fallen ancient god. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and immediately thought of the legend of the primordial heavenly Tao Academy. It was said that a long time ago, the 100 territories did not have the concept of a domain. It was still in a chaotic era where there were endless disputes and raging wars. In that era, the 100 territories was a wasteland. There were no rules, no order, only killing and the law of the jungle. Later, a stream of light fell from the primordial star system that hung high in the sky and landed in the 100 territories. From then on, a mysterious cultivator appeared in the 100 territories. With his own strength, he pacified the comprehensive disputes of the 100 territories. He established supreme authority with mountains of corpses and seas of blood and was worshipped by all living beings. He straightened out the moral code, calmed the people's hearts, set the law, and enforced the rules. From then on, the development of the 100 territories was on the right track. They were divided into domains, and each domain had its own protector and large clans. It could be said that the source of everything came from that mysterious cultivator. Chapter 44:12. After the mysterious cultivator completely unified the 100 domains, he took in 5 disciples and gave a part of his orthodoxy to them before leaving mysteriously. These 5 disciples founded the Archean Heavenly Tao Academy. It could be said that the Archean Heavenly Tao Academy was the symbol of that mysterious cultivator. Since then, there had been no more news of that mysterious cultivator in the 100 domains, but his legend had been circulating in the 100 domains for a long time. They both fell from the ancient star system. The legend of the Archean Heavenly Tao Academy was a mysterious cultivator, while the head of the child said that he was a fallen ancient god. There were similarities between the two. However, Zhuowen was sure that the mysterious cultivator was definitely an ancient god. He just didn't dare to speculate whether he had fallen or not. Perhaps that ancient god had fallen with serious injuries and did not completely die, so he took in 5 disciples and founded the Archean Heavenly Tao Academy. There should be a corresponding purpose. As for what the purpose was, Zhuowen naturally didn't know. All of this was just his guess. You just said that I might be able to help you break free from the shackles of the ancient slate. Why are you so sure? Zhuowen suddenly asked. The head of the child said with a complicated gaze, because you can ignore the rules of this maze. The maze's barrier is endowed with powerful rules by the ancient slate. No matter how strong you are, you can't break the rules and break the barrier. All living beings who enter this place must abide by the rules of this place. We guardians don't dare to violate them, but you can pass through the maze's barrier at will. This proves that the rules of this place are ineffective against you. Although I don't know how you did it, with your ability to ignore the rules, it's enough to easily reach the deepest part of the maze, which is the 18th checkpoint. Zhuowen pondered and said, "What's there?" "I don't know what's there. It's just that I accidentally heard one of the ancient gods who came in for fun mention that there was a key there." The head of the child said with excitement in its eyes. "You think that's the key that can allow you and even the guardians of the ancient slate to break free from their shackles?" Zhuowen asked. The toddler's head did not answer, but the smile on his face confirmed Zhuowen's words. "Fellow Daoist, I've already told you everything I know. You will keep your promise, right?" The child's head asked cautiously. Zhuowen smiled slightly and said, "Of course. I'll go to the 18th checkpoint to take a look first. Also, do you have the ability to cover my tracks in the maze?" The moment he entered the maze, he noticed that there were many teleportation arrays, surveillance arrays, and other hidden arrays. These should have been added by the King of Hell later. If he suddenly broke into the 18th checkpoint and took away the things inside, he would be in danger if the King of Hell found out. The child's head grinned and said, "Don't worry. I've set your position at the first level. The outside world won't be able to see your exact location." Zhuowen nodded and did not say anything else. Instead, he went through the barriers and directly passed through them. After shuttling through several barriers, he stopped and leaned against the barrier. His divine telekinesis was communicating with Shan Lingyun in the big world, asking her to use the art of spiritual speech to deduce the authenticity of the words spoken by the head of the toddler. Although there were not many loopholes in the words of the toddler's head, Zhuowen still felt that something was wrong. To be cautious, he asked Shan Lingyun to deduce. Soon, Zhuowen received Shan Lingyun's response. The words of the toddler's head were partly true and partly false. He did not tell the complete truth. Zhuowen asked Shan Lingyun to deduce whether the toddler's head had any ill intentions towards him. The response he received was that the toddler's head was indeed full of ill intentions towards him, and the ill intentions were extremely strong. Zhuowen squinted his eyes. He thought for a while and once again lifted his foot and passed through the depths of the maze. He had a vague idea in his mind. Now, he just wanted to go to the 18th checkpoint and see what was there. The barriers in front of him were passed through one by one. Zhuowen passed through layers of barriers and checkpoints. However, at the exit of each checkpoint, he would carefully observe the gatekeepers of each checkpoint. Soon, he found that the gatekeepers of each checkpoint were as cunning as foxes and extremely vicious. They did not look like harmless innocents at all. The more he observed, the more he squinted his eyes and the clearer his thoughts became. When he reached the 18th checkpoint, he found that what appeared in front of him was no longer a maze with layers of barriers. Instead, it was a vast open space. This open space was spotlessly white and flawless, and it was surrounded by numerous spotlessly white enormous pillars that towered into the sky. On the surface of each pillar, there were various patterns of various colors drawn on it. Zhuowen could not help but look up at the sky above him. He found that bright stars appeared one after another in the sky that was supported by the huge pillars. These stars were grouped together and formed a certain shape. The stars in the sky were divided into 3 regions, and the arrangement of the stars in these 3 regions was completely different. The stars in the first region were arranged in accordance with each other, like a ring-shaped snake biting its tail. When Zhuowen looked directly at the constellation of the strange ring-shaped snake formed by the many stars, countless grand and strange voices suddenly sounded in his mind. In an instant, Zhuowen covered his head and fell to the ground. He kept twitching. His head was splitting as if it was going to explode. The strange and grand voices were like maggots that constantly wreaked havoc in his soul. They kept squeezing his soul. Zhuowen was horrified to find that his soul was gradually dissipating under the influence of the strange voices. His soul was like wood that was being burned by fire. It was constantly being consumed and was collapsing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Zhuowen was terrified to the extreme. He did not know why this was happening. He had only looked at the constellation in the sky. Why was his soul severely injured for no reason? If he did not find a way to contain it as soon as possible, his soul would soon completely collapse. When Zhuowen's soul became weaker and weaker, the 2 primordial stones hidden in the depths of his soul suddenly lit up with a blazing purple light. A mysterious purple power swept out from the depths of his soul like a tide. Zhuowen's soul, which was on the verge of collapse, finally stopped collapsing. With the help of the purple power, it began to gradually heal. Poochie. Zhuowen spat out a mouthful of blood and knelt on the ground with one knee. His eyes were still filled with horror. He originally wanted to subconsciously look up at the sky, but he quickly stopped himself. He remembered that the reason his soul was severely injured was because he looked up at the strange constellation in the sky. Zhuowen lowered his head. His gaze suddenly became strange. This was because some information that did not belong to him suddenly appeared in his mind. When he carefully considered the information in his mind, his eyes narrowed and he revealed a look of shock. Chapter 44:13. One of the 28 immemorial star mansions, the Chariot Star Mansions. The Chariot Star Mansion's slate is a small toy that this god casually made out of boredom. Customers who purchase the Chariot Star Mansion's slate can explore the levels within. If you can solve the final level, there is a small gift that this god left behind in advance. This inexplicable message appeared in Zhuowen's mind. Although this message appeared in his mind, the moment Zhuowen looked at it, he seemed to hear an extremely majestic and loud voice reverberating in his ears. This is the final level of the Chariot Star Mansion's slate. Customer, you are already considered amazing to be able to make it here. My small gift is hidden in the Chariot Star Mansion's constellation that represents the Chariot Star God. This is still a test of your intelligence. If your intelligence is sufficient, the small gift will be yours. Zhuowen's expression instantly changed. The meaning of the owner of this voice was very clear. If he wanted his small gift, he would have to observe the constellation above the stone pillar. However, when he thought about how his divine soul had almost collapsed, Zhuowen was really afraid. The constellation above the stone pillar was too terrifying. It was definitely not something that he could casually observe. There was an ancient record that one should not look up to the gods, and the god referred to the mysterious primordial god. Could this Chariot Star god be one of the immemorial gods? Zhuowen's eyes revealed a pondering look. The message that suddenly appeared in his mind revealed many secrets. The original name of the immemorial slate, which was known as the Chariot Star Mansion's slate in the 100 outer regions, was a small toy that the Chariot Star god, one of the 28 immemorial star mansions, had created out of boredom. The Chariot Star god should be one of the immemorial gods in the immemorial star system, and there were 27 other immemorial gods that matched his position. Since the 18th level of the Chariot Star Tablet fragment was the final level of the complete version of the Chariot Star Tablet, it meant that this fragment was the final stage of the Chariot Star Tablet. Then, the strange constellation above the stone pillar should represent the Chariot Star God's constellation symbol. Zhuowen's thoughts were in a mess. In an instant, he thought of many things. He didn't have any concept of the 28 immemorial star mansions, but he knew that the 28 immemorial star mansions were terrifying immemorial gods that far exceeded his imagination. He had only taken one look at the constellation that represented the Zhen constellation star god, and his soul had almost collapsed. If it wasn't for the primordial stone blocking the power of the Zhen constellation star god's constellation, he might have already perished. From the information, it can be seen that the small gift left behind by this ancient god is hidden in the constellation above the stone pillar. If I want to obtain that so-called small gift, I have to unravel the mystery of the constellation. Zhuowen's brows were tightly knitted. He was currently feeling extremely conflicted. He was also coveting the small gift that the owner of the information in his mind had mentioned. That was an archaic god. The small gift he spoke of might be a priceless treasure to the 100 domains outside the realm. This was a huge temptation for Zhuowen. If I use 2 primordial stones to block my path, will I be able to look up to God to a certain extent? Zhuowen's eyes flickered as he slowly rose to his feet. With a wave of his sleeve, he summoned the primordial stone from the depths of his spirit, causing it to float above his head. A mysterious purple light sprinkled down, causing Zhuowen's entire body to be bathed in it. He looked mysterious and dignified. After summoning the 2 primordial stones, Zhuowen circulated the primordial technique at a high speed. He also took out all the divine medicines related to the recovery of the spirit from the outside world, just in case. After making sufficient preparations, Zhuowen slowly raised his head. His eyelids were slightly drooping, and he didn't dare to look up. The scene from just now quickly flashed through his mind, causing his body to involuntarily tremble as cold sweat broke out on his forehead. The moment he raised his head, Zhuowen took a deep breath and looked up at the sky. His eyes passed through the stone pillars and finally landed on the huge sky at the end of the stone pillar. He once again saw the stars in the sky that were divided into 3 regions. The arrangement of the stars in these 3 regions was completely different. The stars in the first region were arranged in accordance with each other, like a ring-shaped snake biting its tail. After learning his lesson from the first time, Zhuowen didn't carefully stare at this strange constellation. Instead, he quickly turned to the second region. The stars in the second region were divided into 2 rows, forming a straight line. These 2 straight lines converged obliquely towards the center, forming an angle of about 150 degrees. The third region was the same as the first region. The stars in the third region were arranged in accordance with each other, forming a circle. However, it wasn't a perfect circle like the first region. Instead, it was a slightly flat oval. Zhuowen covered both sides of his temples, and his face twisted in pain. That strange and terrifying sound appeared in the depths of his mind again, like countless crawling insects gnawing at his brain. However, the pain this time was much lighter than the previous time. At least, Zhuowen wasn't seriously injured to the point where he could only lie on the ground and twitch in pain. He knew that all this was because the 2 primordial stones had blocked most of the strange power for him. Zhuowen endured the pain and constantly observed the details and differences of the 3 constellations in the 3 regions until Zhuowen really couldn't hold on any longer and had to lower his head. His movements were extremely fast. After lowering his head, he refined the divine medicine that he had already prepared into medicinal liquid and consumed it in time. Under the dual effects of the medicinal liquid and the primordial stones, the recovery period of Zhuowen's spirit was shortened by a lot. Soon, he recovered a lot. Therefore, he continued to raise his head and observe until he couldn't hold on any longer. After repeating this repeatedly, Zhuowen finally remembered all the details of the 3 constellations in his mind. He no longer raised his head to observe, but lowered his head and sat cross-legged on the ground, lost in thought. The stars in the first region were arranged in a perfect circle. After Zhuowen's observation, he could even see the light emitted by the stars, outlining the shape of scales on the edges. At that moment, Zhuowen immediately imagined a snake biting its tail in a circle. This perfect circle represented a snake with its head and tail connected. The second region was 2 oblique lines that converged at a point at the end, forming an angle of about 150 degrees. It was very much like a big mouth opening wide. The third region was an oval. From the shape of the oval, it was not difficult to see that it should be some kind of huge creature. A snake with its head and tail connected, a big mouth opening wide, and a huge creature. What was the connection between these 3? Zhuowen thought for a while, and suddenly his eyes lit up. He muttered to himself, a snake swallowing an elephant. The snake with its head and tail connected was the main character. The big mouth opening was the snake's action, and the huge creature was the giant elephant. If he understood it this way, then everything made sense. Chapter 44:14. A man whose heart is never content is like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. Zhuowen muttered to himself. He had heard the story behind this saying before. The story went something like this. Once upon a time, a very poor man saved the life of a snake. In order to repay the man for saving its life, the snake asked the man to make a request and fulfill his wish. At first, the man only asked for simple food and clothing, and the snake fulfilled his wish. Later, his greed slowly grew and he asked to become an official, and the snake fulfilled his wish. Even when he became a prime minister, he was still not satisfied and asked to become an emperor. At this time, the snake finally understood that human greed was endless, so it swallowed this person in one bite. In the most primitive version, the snake did not swallow an elephant, but the prime minister's image. This also happened to correspond to the saying that a man's heart is never content. In fact, the elliptical constellation in the third region could not only refer to a specific large creature, but also the abstract endless greed of the human heart. The key to this problem should be in the constellation in the third region. Zhuowen took a deep breath and raised his head with difficulty. He looked at the third region in the sky and observed carefully. Finally, he saw a slightly dim and inconspicuous star in the constellation of the third region. This star was in the middle of the elliptical constellation, hanging there alone, and its light was much dimmer than the surrounding stars. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't even notice that there was such a dim star here. Moreover, the position of this star was on the left side of the constellation. That position was very similar to the position of the human heart. After all, the human heart was also located in the left side of the human chest. And this also coincided with the saying that a man whose heart is never content is like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. When Zhuowen's gaze finally fell on that dim star, Zhuowen's heart suddenly began to beat violently. Thump, 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 thump. The loud and heavy heartbeat continued to beat in his chest, and it was fed back to Zhuowen's ears, causing that strange heartbeat to be magnified without limit. At this moment, Zhuowen's heart became very, very painful, as if it was being twisted by a knife. At the same time, the dim star became brighter and brighter. It was as if it had been injected with new energy, giving it a new luster. As the star grew brighter and brighter, the star seemed to be summoned by Zhuowen. It began to fall downwards at an increasingly fast speed, turning into a meteor. Zhuowen, on the other hand, covered his chest with both hands. His heart was beating faster and faster. Blood was like a rushing river, rushing through his entire body, causing his skin to turn bright red, looking like a red-hot soldering iron. The extreme pain caused Zhuowen to cry out in pain. It was too painful. This kind of pain made him wish he was dead. When his heartbeat reached its limit, as if it was about to explode, the primordial stone emitted a gentle purple light and quickly restrained the abnormal heartbeat. On the other hand, Zhuowen regained his senses. He was still in great pain, but he didn't feel like he was on the verge of death. He immediately circulated the primordial technique. While absorbing the power of the primordial stone, he tried his best to regulate his heartbeat. When his heartbeat returned to its normal threshold, Zhuowen's breathing also became much calmer. At the same time, the meteor that fell from the sky finally arrived at the open space. It fell not far away, creating a blazing light. When the light faded away, everything became silent. It didn't even create a huge crater or any other damage on the ground. After Zhuowen stabilized his heartbeat, he quickly rushed towards the light. He wanted to see what was hidden in the falling star. Soon, Zhuowen arrived at the place where the meteor fell. He found a star-shaped emblem there. The emblem was carved from a certain kind of high-quality jade. It was white and flawless, and the texture on its surface revealed mysterious and powerful traces. When Zhuowen bent down to pick up the emblem, his heart suddenly trembled. A drop of blood broke out from the depths of his heart and merged with the emblem on its own. In an instant, Zhuowen established some kind of connection with the emblem. The emblem emitted blood-red rays of light that shot into the air and outlined a huge blueprint. Zhuowen looked at it carefully and was surprised to find that it was a blueprint. The blueprint's object was a divine carriage. This divine carriage was named the Zhen constellation divine carriage by the Zhen constellation star god. It was a divine carriage that transcended time and space. The blueprint's design was exquisite and perfect. Every detail of the divine carriage was fully outlined. Even the tiny nails inside the carriage wheels were carved in great detail. There was also a certain explanation. On the blueprint, the carriage was supported by 4 thick bow-legged beast legs. The carriage was square in shape, and there were 4 bars on top. On top of the bars was an octahedron niche. The niche had 4 screens with flower handles, couplets, and coiling dragon pillars. The niche was decorated with beautiful screens and niche curtains. The roof of the carriage was a dome. The eaves on all sides were carved with gold. Coiling dragons poked out from the eaves' 8 corners, and horn lanterns hung from the dragon heads. There were 10 lanterns under the eaves, like a weaver holding a flower. The top of the carriage had a square top lamp that was like a bun. The 2 poles of the carriage were horizontal, facing each other. The body of the carriage was carved with 3 plum blossoms, gourd vines, and 9 lions. There were also carvings of peonies, 2 phoenixes facing the sun, and 9 dragons leaping into the sea. It was majestic. There were a total of 81 candles on the carriage, and they were all covered with horn lampshades. It could be said that this divine carriage was extremely luxurious and exquisite. It exuded a luxurious aura everywhere. Zhuowen looked carefully at the material description on the blueprint and was dumbfounded. This was because he had never heard of the materials mentioned in the blueprint. Don't tell me these materials are from the ancient star system? Zhuowen's mouth twitched. If that was the case, then what was the use of obtaining the design of the divine carriage? Even if the speed of the divine carriage surpassed time and space and was considered a good mount in the immemorial star system, without the corresponding materials, everything was useless. When Zhuowen's gaze landed on the last part of the design, his pupils shrunk to the size of needles because there was a line of additional instructions. Guests who make it to the last level, if their strength is too weak to withstand the pressure of the chariot constellation, they will become a sacrifice for the chariot constellation slate. At that time, the chariot constellation slate will automatically sacrifice your flesh and soul to release all the guardians inside. The chariot constellation's pressure is not strong. I only used a small part of it, and the creatures in the immemorial star system can withstand it. The reason I set up this segment is to give the guardians some hope. Otherwise, if they fall into despair, they will slack off. In that case, it won't be difficult to pass the level, and the corresponding fun will be lost. After he finished reading the final explanation, Zhuowen's gaze was gloomy to the extreme. Sure enough, the head of the young child didn't have any good intentions. So it turned out that it had such intentions. It intentionally allowed him to enter the final level with the objective of making him become a sacrifice and a stepping stone for him to escape. Chapter 44:15. The materials of the chariot basically come from the immemorial star system. It's basically impossible for me to make a complete version of the chariot. If I follow the design in this blueprint and replace it with the corresponding materials, I wonder if I can successfully design a simplified version of the chariot. Zhuowen looked at the blueprint in his hand again and was amazed. His eyes became brighter and brighter. Although he wasn't very good at refining tools, he had dabbled in it before. From the design in his hand, he could see that if this divine chariot was completed, no one in the 100 outer realms would be able to catch up to its speed. The details of the chariot were too exquisite. Even if the corresponding materials were simplified, if it could be combined according to the blueprint, it would be far superior to any mount in the 100 territories. This was because the design concept of the chariot throne was too advanced, far surpassing the designs of all the mounts in the 100 domains. Even if it was made from ordinary materials according to the rules on the design, it would still have extraordinary characteristics. However, this was just Zhuowen's imagination. As for whether it could be realized, Zhuowen would have to try it to know. After Zhuowen put away the blueprint of the chariot, he carefully searched the open space again. After finding nothing else, he left this place. Zhuowen went all the way out, passing through many barriers. At the 5th level, Zhuowen met the virtual corona again. However, Zhuowen ignored him and continued to pass through the barriers, making the virtual corona's attack miss again. Later, he met other contestants, but he did not make a fuss. Instead, he quickly left without alerting others. When he came to the connection between the 2nd level and the 1st level again, his gaze fell on the many strange heads behind the stone door. The originally carefree head of the toddler was first stunned the moment it saw Zhuowen, and then it turned pale with fright. After a long time, it forced itself to calm down and blurted out, "You didn't." "Oh no, fellow Daoist, you're so efficient. You've already passed the last level." Zhuowen was expressionless and said lightly, "Are you surprised that I didn't die?" The face of the child's head froze, then it shook its head and laughed dryly. "How could that be? Fellow Daoist, you're exaggerating. You're my hope. How could I wish for you to die?" Zhuowen's lips curled into a cold smile. "If you want to escape, I have to die. Otherwise, how can you escape?" The boy narrowed his eyes, took a deep look at Zhuowen, and said with a deep voice, "Have you solved the puzzle of the last level?" "Yes, and I also received a small gift from the charlatan star god. I heard that he had an agreement with you gatekeepers. As long as the challengers couldn't withstand the pressure of the final stage and died there, they would become sacrificial offerings and become the prerequisite for you to escape. Zhuowen said calmly. The child's head laughed out loud. His eyes were filled with madness and unwillingness as he roared, "Why don't you die? You are not a living being from the ancient star system, so how can you withstand the pressure of Star-Godian constellation? Even if it's just a trace, it's not something you can withstand." The child's head became crazier and crazier as he continued, "Back then, Star-Godian constellation deceived us. As long as the slate was in the ancient star system, no one would die under his pressure. That was just a scam he used to appease us. But when the slate fell into the 100 territories, I knew the chance to escape had come. But who would have thought that the living beings of the 100 territories were a bunch of trash? Take that King Yama for example. He had the slate for a very long time, but he still couldn't solve all the levels and enter the last level. What a piece of trash. I finally found a native cultivator like you who ignored the rules of this place. You actually didn't die under the pressure of the last level. Why?" Zhuowen silently looked at the crazy child's head with a calm gaze. After rambling for a while, the child's head lowered his head dejectedly. He glanced at Zhuowen and sneered, "What are you going to do with me next? Kill me? But that's wishful thinking. I can't die in this slate. No matter how many times you kill me, I will borrow the power of this place to be reborn and continue to bring the corresponding fun to the challengers." "How ironic." Zhuowen said indifferently, "I entered here to compete, so I'm here to break through." After saying that, Zhuowen passed through the stone door and came to the front of the stone door. He wanted to see how many levels he could pass if he didn't rely on passing through the stronghold. Of course, he did this for the sake of not drawing attention. The chariot constellation slate was currently an item of the royal court of hell. If it was known that he could disregard the rules of the slate and pass through the barrier at will, then it would truly be terrible. After all, the king of hell was the most powerful force in the Void Yama realm. He couldn't afford to offend him. Zhuowen moved the stone statue away and walked through the small door. The many heads behind the stone door began to attack Zhuowen crazily. Zhuowen's eyes flashed scarlet. Billowing demonic chi surged out like a viscous liquid and covered his body like some kind of thick armor. It blocked the attacks of the surrounding ferocious heads. As for Zhuowen, he used his movement technique and easily passed through the small door, arriving at the second stage. After passing through, Zhuowen walked through the barrier into the depths of the second level without looking back. He didn't look at the child's head's complicated gaze. Without relying on the ability to pass through the barrier, Zhuowen's speed of passing through the maze was much slower. However, he didn't know if it was because his eyes were looking directly at the constellation of the chariot in the sky above the last level. When he was in the maze, his eyes often saw the correct path in advance. This allowed Zhuowen to smoothly reach the exit of the second level without taking any detours. At the exit of the second level stood a huge bronze door. In front of the bronze door, a man with disheveled hair and a dirty face was bound by thick chains. The man's hair was disheveled, and it was impossible to tell his age and appearance. However, his scarlet and crazy eyes left a deep impression on Zhuowen. Zhuowen knew that the guardian of the second level should be the crazy human demonic cultivator mentioned by the child's head. Brother Zhuo, you also came to this level?" While Zhuowen was observing the crazy demonic cultivator, a pleasantly surprised voice came from the other side. Zhuowen turned his head and found that the owner of the voice was Li Shuo. At this moment, Li Shuo's face was full of surprise. He quickly walked in front of Zhuowen. In fact, he had passed the first level very early. It was just that he had taken a long time to find the right exit in the second level maze. "Is this the guardian of the second level? He looks like a demonic cultivator, but he seems to have lost his mind." Li Shuo's gaze fell on the crazy demonic cultivator in front of the bronze door. His eyes narrowed slightly as he muttered to himself. Chapter 44:16. There's also a small door below the bronze door. As long as we can get past this crazy demonic cultivator, we'll be able to pass. However, we must be careful. This demonic cultivator's strength is not simple, Zhuowen reminded. Li Shuo nodded. He glanced at Zhuowen and said, "Young Master Zhuo, do you want to go first or should I?" "You go first," Zhuowen said. If Li Shuo encountered danger while dealing with this demonic cultivator, he might be able to help. Li Shuo scratched his head and said embarrassedly, "Then I'll do as you say." After saying that, Li Shuo's face turned serious. He came to the bronze door, and his aura rapidly rose under his control. When his aura reached its peak, he took out his Qian Kuan world and began to use his movement technique. He quickly rushed toward the small door below the bronze door. He did not plan to fight the demonic cultivator head-on. Therefore, he focused all his energy on his movement technique, hoping to rush through the bronze door as soon as possible. Roar! The crazy demonic cultivator's scarlet eyes became increasingly fierce. He opened his mouth wide, revealing sharp and cold teeth. Thick saliva continuously flowed along the tip of his teeth. Whoosh! The demonic cultivator's legs suddenly exerted force. His entire body was like a black shadow. He quickly disappeared and appeared in front of Li Shuo as if he had teleported. Originally, Li Shuo was not far from the bronze door. He thought that he could successfully avoid the demonic cultivator and directly enter the small door. He did not expect the demonic cultivator to instantly block his path. However, Li Shuo's reaction was very fast. He twisted his waist, and his entire body was like a flexible spring. He changed directions in mid-air. At the same time, his right hand clenched into a fist. Borrowing the tribulation force of fire and lightning from the Qian Kuan world, he punched the back of the demonic cultivator's head. The demonic cultivator did not dodge. He stretched out his right hand, ignoring the lightning and fire tribulation on the surface of Li Shuo's fist, and pinched it with his palm. Li Shuo snorted coldly. He swept his right leg and quickly kicked the demonic cultivator's lower body. The demonic cultivator was extremely agile. He suddenly retracted his legs, and then like a rabbit, he kicked Li Shuo's right leg. Li Shuo's right leg shook. He was unsteady and almost fell to the ground. However, the demonic cultivator pinched Li Shuo's right fist and fiercely flung it away. Li Shuo was thrown to the ground in a sorry state, and a terrifying tremor could be heard from the ground. Li Shuo groaned and spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were filled with shock and anger. Roar! The demonic cultivator's scarlet eyes became even more ferocious. With a roar, he grabbed Li Shuo's right hand and began to swing him around on the ground like a madman. The pitiful Li Shuo was thrown around like a toy by the fiendish cultivator. He was thrown around until he was dizzy and vomiting. Even his stomach was about to be thrown out. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed as a demonic red light filled his eyes. Demonic qi gushed out from all the acupoints in his body. He took a step forward, and countless waves of devil qi swept out behind him. At this moment, the demonic cultivator had already grabbed Li Shuo's wrist and lifted him up high, wanting to smash him to the ground. Zhuowen, on the other hand, appeared just in time. His right palm was like lightning, and he quickly slapped the devil cultivator's wrist more than 10 times. The demonic cultivator let out a muffled groan. His wrist couldn't help but soften, and then he let go of the palm that was grabbing Li Shuo. Li Shuo fell to the ground in a sorry state, constantly coughing up blood. His eyes were filled with fear. "You go first. Leave this to me," Zhuowen quickly said to Li Shuo behind him. Then, he engaged in a frenzied battle with the demonic cultivator. For a moment, the bronze door was filled with demonic qi. A dark and strange atmosphere spread out. Zhuowen's eyes were filled with seriousness. This demonic cultivator's 4 limbs were bound by special chains, and his strength was greatly weakened. Yet, he was still so strong. Zhuowen didn't want to be entangled with the demonic cultivator. After using all his strength to push him back, he quickly rushed toward the small door. However, the demonic cultivator was extremely crazy. He continued to entangle Zhuowen with no regard for his life. He even used the method of exchanging a life for a life. Zhuowen was once again entangled. Xiaohei. Zhuowen's eyes were cold. He reached out with his right hand, and the High Abyss Sacred Sword appeared in his palm. However, just as the High Abyss Sacred Sword appeared in Zhuowen's hand, Xiao Hei emerged from the sword hilt. In its little claws was an extraordinary design. Kid, where did you get this design? It's really too amazing. The design inside is really at the peak of perfection. It's far beyond the top blacksmiths of the 100 domains. Which genius is it that is even more talented than this dragon lord? Xiao Hei's eyes lit up. It was as if he was a pervert who had seen a peerless beauty. He stared at the design in his hand with bright eyes and chattered endlessly in Zhuowen's ear. Zhuowen sucked in a breath of cold air. He resisted the urge to slap Xiao Hei to death. This was a battle. Why were you discussing the design with me? We'll talk about this later. Let's fight first. After Zhuowen finished speaking, he clenched his right hand. The high abyss sacred sword in his hand emitted a blazing dark light. It swept out at an extremely fast speed, aiming straight for the demonic cultivator's forehead. What surprised Zhuowen was that the demonic cultivator actually quickly retreated. He covered his head with both hands and howled in pain. His body trembled as he covered his head. He curled up in a corner, not daring to look at Zhuowen. You summoned me to fight with this thing? Isn't this like using a sledgehammer to kill a chicken? Xiao Hei curled his lips as he looked disdainfully at the demonic cultivator who was curled up in the corner and trembling. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He had not expected this demonic cultivator to suddenly act like this. He glanced at the design in Xiao Hei's hand. After thinking for a moment, he snatched the design and walked toward the demonic cultivator. As Zhuowen walked closer, the demonic cultivator suddenly screamed in fear and began to desperately struggle to retreat. However, his 4 limbs were bound by specially made chains, and his movements were completely restricted. He could only move in a small area. After the demonic cultivator retreated to his limit, his scarlet eyes revealed a look of fear. He actually knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Zhuowen repeatedly. He sobbed, Mars, Mars, Mars. Spare me. The demonic cultivator kept kowtowing. His scalp was bleeding, but he did not realize it. Zhuowen silently looked at the demonic cultivator who was deeply traumatized. He vaguely understood. It seemed that the demonic cultivator was afraid of the remnant aura of the Zhen constellation star god on the design. The reason why the demonic cultivator ended up in such a miserable state and lost his freedom was because of the Zhen constellation star god. It could be said that the Zhen constellation star god was the demonic cultivator's greatest enemy. However, just by sensing the Zhen constellation star god's aura, he was so afraid that the demonic cultivator did not have any thoughts of revenge. Zhuowen looked indifferently at the demonic cultivator who was curled up in the corner. He did not attack again. Instead, he held the design of the Zhen constellation divine chariot and directly walked through the small door. On the other hand, Xiao Hei sat on the hilt of her sword. She looked at this scene with a dumbfounded expression. Didn't you summon me to help you fight? Why is nothing happening? Xiao Hei, what are you still standing there for? Hurry up and follow me. Don't you want to know the origin of this design? Zhuowen walked to the small door and turned his head slightly. After sizing up Xiao Hei, he shrugged and said, Of course I want to know. Explain it to me. Xiao Hei hurriedly rode the Taiyu sacred sword and followed after him. Her mouth was full of mysteries. It could be said that she could not forget the origin of the design. Chapter 44:17. After passing through the small door of the second stage, Zhuowen used his divine sense to tell Xiao Hei everything about the design. Xiao Hei's eyes lit up as he listened. He didn't expect Zhuowen to be so lucky as to obtain a design left behind by an ancient god. Zhuowen also knew that Xiao Hei had an almost monstrous talent in the art of equipment crafting. Therefore, he intentionally gave the design of the chariot to Xiao Hei to study. Seeing Xiao Hei take the design back to the great world with satisfaction, Zhuowen breathed a sigh of relief. The chariot throne was of great importance. After this competition, Zhuowen planned to discuss it with Blackie. If they could find the appropriate substitute materials, then he would really be able to create a simplified version of the chariot throne. Young Master Zhuo, it's all thanks to you just now. Otherwise, I would have been so severely injured that I wouldn't even be able to pass the second stage. As soon as Zhuowen walked out of the small door, Li Shuo, who had been waiting anxiously, immediately came forward to express his gratitude. Zhuowen waved his hand and said, "It's nothing much. Fellow Daoist Li Shuo, follow me from now on. We can help each other that way." Li Shuo naturally agreed. At the same time, his evaluation of Zhuowen went up a notch. That demonic cultivator just now wasn't simple at all. Yet, that demonic cultivator had said that it was as easy as lifting a finger. It could be seen that the demonic cultivator's strength was beyond his expectations. Moreover, Li Shuo was quite happy in his heart. In his opinion, by following Zhuowen, he would definitely be able to pass many more stages. Zhuowen, on the other hand, had another idea. From the demonic cultivator's performance, he could tell that the chariot design, which had the remnant aura of the chariot star god, might save him a lot of trouble when he tried to break through. Of course, whether the remnant aura on the chariot design would have a deterrent effect on all the guardians had yet to be verified. However, it gave Zhuowen a new direction to pass the stages. Next, Li Shuo followed closely behind Zhuowen. What shocked him was that Zhuowen walked through the maze without the slightest hesitation. He didn't even stop at a corner to think like the others. Instead, he walked in one go. What surprised him even more was that Zhuowen seemed to be walking on the right path. They didn't get stuck in a certain loop or walk into a dead end. Li Shuo's heart was filled with curiosity. He really wanted to ask Zhuowen, how did he do it? However, after seeing Zhuowen's focused expression, he dismissed the idea. He thought that Zhuowen had a special ability to distinguish between walking through the maze. In the end, Li Shuo followed behind Zhuowen under puzzled and strange gazes, and they smoothly arrived at the exit of the third level. "This, young Master Zhuo, how did you do it?" Li Shuo couldn't help but ask. "Maybe my intuition is more powerful," Zhuowen answered vaguely without turning his head. He couldn't possibly say that he had entered the 18th stage and looked directly at the constellation left behind by the ancient gods, which gave him the ability to see through the maze. If he said that, Li Shuo might not necessarily believe him. Li Shuo scratched his head and could only say, "Oh." His gaze fell on the guardian of the third stage. The guardian of this stage was a charming and graceful young woman. She wore enchanting clothes, had a curvaceous figure, and a pair of purplish-black eyes, which were even more alluring. She had her left hand around her waist, and her right index finger and thumb pinched a gilded tobacco pipe. Her blood-red lips took a light puff of the tobacco mouth, and then she exhaled gently, blowing out pink smoke. Zhuowen glanced at the woman indifferently. He immediately noticed the hidden tail behind her. At the base of the tail, there was an imperceptible colorful chain. "My two guests, come. I'll let you experience supreme pleasure." The enchanting woman's cherry lips blew gently, and the pink smoke drifted gently. Zhuowen and Li Shuo immediately smelled a sweet fragrance. "It smells so good." After Li Shuo took a puff, his eyes revealed an intoxicated look. He took a few more puffs and muttered to himself. His consciousness became a little hazy, and his footsteps became light. Zhuowen stood on the spot. He was surrounded by the pink mist, and the addictive sweet fragrance assaulted his senses, making him a little restless. Then, Zhuowen felt a burst of fragrance behind his ear. It was warm and fragrant, and it made one's imagination run wild. "Sir, life is bitter and short. Why not enjoy it while it lasts? I can give you the ultimate pleasure, and let you understand the true meaning of happiness." The soft and charming voice sounded softly in Zhuowen's ears, and the surrounding pink became more intense. Zhuowen could not help but feel his whole body heat up, and he had an inexplicable impulse. However, Zhuowen's state of mind was still calm. With a thought, the design of the chariot was once again brought out by him. In the great world, Xiao He, who was originally concentrating on studying the design, had just reached the key point when the design disappeared into thin air. He was so angry that he stomped his feet and kept cursing Zhuowen in his heart for being immoral. When the design appeared in Zhuowen's palm, Zhuowen's restless state of mind completely calmed down when he touched the silky smooth surface and the complex texture. At the same time, The pink smoke that densely covered the surroundings dissipated instantly. The exhaling sound also quickly distanced itself from Zhuowen, and it let out a shrill scream. After the pink smoke dissipated, Zhuowen's vision became much clearer. He also saw the original appearance of the guardian of the third stage. It was a ferocious-looking one-eyed fox. Its tail was bound by colorful chains, and pink smoke was coming out of its mouth. However, at this moment, the one-eyed fox was curled up on the ground and trembling. Its only remaining eye was looking at Zhuowen in fear. Zhuowen looked at the one-eyed fox indifferently. He thought to himself, "This fox's illusion is really powerful. It can actually make me fall into an illusion unknowingly. God's aura. I was wrong." The one-eyed fox covered its eyes and trembled. Its voice was hoarse and heavy, and it was very unpleasant to hear. It was completely different from the voice of the graceful woman in the illusion. What happened to me just now? I was clearly enjoying myself with a beauty. How did I end up here? Li Shuo, who had been in a daze, regained his clarity. He looked around with a confused expression at first, but when he saw Zhuowen, who was looking at him with a faint smile, he immediately realized that something was wrong. Li Shuo's mind recalled the charming scene just now, and his bronze face suddenly became very red. He said softly, "Young Master Zhuo, just now. Was that an illusion?" Zhuowen smiled and pointed at the one-eyed fox curled up in the corner. He said, "It's all this fox demon's doing. The beauty you saw in the illusion just now is the true form of this fox demon." Li Shuo looked at the ugly fox curled up in front of him, and his face became very ugly. Especially when he thought about how he was about to have sex with it in the illusion, he almost vomited. Chapter 44:18. Let's go. Zhuowen smiled faintly and took the lead to walk past the one-eyed fox. He entered the small door and left the third level. The one-eyed fox was trembling and did not dare to look at Zhuowen. It was as if it would be scared out of its wits if it looked at him. Li Shuo quickly followed. His evaluation of Zhuowen was getting higher and higher. Not only could he easily find the correct path in the maze, but he could also easily get rid of the guardians. Even Li Ying, whom he respected the most, might not be as good as him. Zhuowen heaved a sigh of relief in his heart instead. He knew that so long as he possessed the design of the chariot, then he could rely on it to easily pass through the test of any guardian. It could be said that the chariot design was his cheat. Next, Zhuowen relied on his eyes that had seen the chariot design and the chariot design to pass through the later levels without any obstructions. In order to avoid meeting other contestants, Zhuowen sensed that someone was approaching and avoided them in advance. Li Shuo, on the other hand, was completely dumbfounded as he followed behind Zhuowen. From time to time, he would praise Zhuowen in his heart. Of course, in order not to stand out too much, Zhuowen could also slow down. Occasionally, he would deliberately fall into a certain loop of the maze to kill some time. Even so, on the third day, the two of them had already reached the 13th level. "Prince Zhuo, there are still 16 hours until the end. We might be able to pass the 15th level. The Gold Lord said that as long as we can pass the 15th level and above, the King of Hell will personally reward us. The reward will definitely be very generous." In the 13th level of the maze, Li Shuo was extremely excited. He chattered non-stop to Zhuowen about the benefits of passing the 15th level and his expectations. Zhuowen, on the other hand, shook his head and laughed in spite of himself. With his current ability, not to mention the 15th stage, even clearing the stage would not be a problem. However, Zhuowen did not plan to do so. At most, he would fight for the 14th level. The reason was simple. He didn't want to meet the illusory King of Hell. It was common knowledge that the Chariot Mansion slate, the current Primeval slate, was something that fell from the Primeval star, and it was extremely precious. Even in the King of Hell, this item was a precious treasure placed in a forbidden area. This time, the King of Hell had suddenly interfered in the three great clans' grand competition and even proposed to use the Chariot Mansion slate as part of the literary battle. Zhuowen felt that the King of Hell had other motives. If his performance was too outstanding, It might bring about a bad result. After all, the bird that sticks out will be shot first. Zhuowen had already asked Shan Lingyun to make a deduction when he was attempting the 10th level. This time, he would at most be able to make it to the 14th level. If he ventured deeper, there would be unexpected risks. Of course, as the result of this deduction involved the virtual king of hell, the result of the deduction still had some interference. Shan Lingyun could only deduce a symbolic revelation. However, even though it was only the 14th level, Zhuowen felt that he was far ahead of the other contestants. Even if it was the virtual corona, Zhuowen didn't think that he could make it to the 10th level. After all, 3 days was too short. Zhuowen spent a total of 6 hours in the 13th level before he barely found the exit of the 13th level. Furthermore, he spent a lot of effort to make it past the gatekeeper. When he entered the 14th level, there were only 2 hours left. Zhuowen purposely went in circles inside. Li Shuo naturally didn't know that Zhuowen was purposely going easy on him. He was still amazed by Zhuowen's awesomeness. The way he looked at Zhuowen was full of admiration. At the same time, in the gladiator arena, no one stood for 3 days and 3 nights. All the spectators were patiently looking at the map of the maze above the gladiator arena. Of course, most people's gazes were on the 2 golden light spots that were far ahead in the map. These 2 golden light spots weren't very eye-catching at first, and they even lagged behind the others. However, later, they skyrocketed and overtook the golden light spots in front of them at an extremely fast speed. They finally rushed to the front. Moreover, the speed of these 2 light spots was maintained throughout. They didn't slow down because of the increased difficulty of the later levels. As a result, they left the other 13 light spots far behind them. Now, there was only an hour left before the 3-day deadline. The 2 light spots in front had already made it to the 14th level. The 3rd light spot that was closest to them was only at the 8th level. The 4th light spot was at the 7th level. The gap was huge. Everyone was guessing who the 2 light spots in the lead were. Of course, most people guessed that they would choose between Virtual Corona, Mi Liang, and Li Ying. Jinyaro Jun stood in the middle of the gladiator arena and silently looked at the 2 light spots in front. He frowned slightly. He originally thought that the 2 light spots in front would make it past the 15th level. However, he didn't expect their speed to suddenly drop on the last day. This lowered his expectations to the lowest. Now, there were only 2 hours left, and the 2 light spots had just entered the 14th level. It was obviously impossible for them to make it through another level in 2 hours. After all, the levels in the maze got harder the further one went. Among the 3 aristocratic families, Xu Jiering of the Xulong family and Mi Haomiao of the Xu Qi family were the calmest. Family head Mi, you've changed after 3 days of absence. Mi Liang's performance has exceeded my expectations. Xu Jiering looked at Mi Haomiao and revealed a rare smile. Mi Haomiao laughed, but said humbly, Family head Xu, you're too kind. Your virtual corona is still the best. After all, this is different from a battle of words. Mi Liang may be good at words, but when it comes to battle of words, he might not be as good as virtual corona. Li Yinglong stood alone at the side. When he saw Mi Haomiao and Xu Jiering praising each other, his expression didn't look too good. It was obvious that Xu Jiering and Mi Haomiao had mistaken the 2 light spots in front for virtual corona and Mi Liang. After all, these 2 were the 2nd and 3rd absolute geniuses on the Void Yama god list. They had a huge advantage in terms of talent and strength. Although Li Yinglong was unwilling, he didn't have much confidence in Li Ying and Zhuowen. Even he subconsciously thought that the 2 light spots represented virtual corona and Mi Liang. Aya. Family head Li Ying is actually not bad. He's also made it to the 8th level. He's only 6 levels away from Mi Liang and virtual corona. The difference isn't as big as I thought. Mi Haomiao glanced at the gloomy Li Yinglong and suddenly raised his eyebrows. Although he looked like he was trying to persuade him, his tone didn't sound like he was trying to persuade him at all. He was obviously mocking him. Li Yinglong was furious and snorted, We still haven't decided who the light spots represent yet. It's still too early for you to be so sure that they're Mi Liang and virtual corona. Although Li Yinglong said that, he felt even more uncertain and uneasy. Mi Haomiao chuckled and didn't answer Li Yinglong's question. His heart was filled with disdain. Wasn't it obvious? In terms of talent and strength, Xu Mianyang and Mi Liang were far superior to the others. Now that these two were leading the way, who else could it be but these two? You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.